The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and tobacco smoke that had seeped into the walls over decades. Clara sat in a chair that creaked under her weight, her hands folded in her lap, fingers raw from scrubbing floors that no longer belonged to her. The man across the desk wouldn't meet her eyes. He shuffled papers instead, clearing his throat in that particular way men do when they're about to deliver bad news to a woman they'd rather not deal with. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, still not looking up. "As I explained in my letter, your husband's debts exceed the value of the estate. The house, the furnishings, the livestock, all of it goes to satisfy the creditors. I'm afraid there's nothing left." Clara had expected this. Thomas had been sick for 8 months before he died, and doctors' bills didn't pay themselves. What she hadn't expected was how final it would feel, hearing it spoken aloud in this cramped room with its single dirty window. "I see," she said quietly. The lawyer finally glanced at her, then away again just as quickly. "You have family? Somewhere to go?" "No." "A trade? Some skill?" "I cook." He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "Half the women in Missouri cook, Mrs. Whitmore. That's not going to—" He stopped himself, had the decency to look embarrassed. "What I mean is, you'll need to find employment. Quickly." Clara stood. The chair scraped against the floor. "Thank you for your time. Mrs. Whitmore, But she was already moving toward the door, her worn skirts brushing against the desk edge. "There's a boarding house on 5th Street. Mrs. Callahan sometimes takes on help. You might try there." She didn't answer. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt like the period at the end of a sentence. Outside, March wind cut through her shawl. The street was mud and wagon ruts, buildings leaning into each other like tired old men. Clara stood on the boardwalk for a moment, watching people move past, women with market baskets, men on horseback, a group of children chasing a hoop down the street, all of them going somewhere, belonging to something. She didn't belong here anymore. The thought came clear and cold. Thomas was gone. The house was gone. Everything that had made her Mrs. Thomas Whitmore, respectable wife of a store clerk, had evaporated like morning frost. What remained was just Clara, 42 years old, heavy-bodied, plain-faced, and alone. She turned west and started walking. The boarding house was exactly what she'd expected. Sagging porch, peeling paint, laundry strung across the yard like flags of surrender. Mrs. Callahan answered the door with flour on her apron and suspicion in her eyes. "Help you?" "The lawyer, Mr. Peterson, suggested I speak with you about work. I'm looking for employment. I cook." Mrs. Callahan looked her up and down, and Clara felt the assessment like hands patting her down for valuables. "You're a big woman." "Yes, big women eat a lot." Clara kept her face still. "Big women also work a lot." Mrs. Callahan wiped her hands on her apron. "I got a girl already. She's small, doesn't eat much, works fine. Don't need another." "I see." "Try the hotel. They're always looking." The door was already closing. The hotel manager took one look at her and shook his head. "Kitchen's full. Try the restaurant on Market Street." The restaurant on Market Street wasn't hiring. Neither was the bakery, the tea room, or the boarding school. By late afternoon, Clara's feet ached and her stomach was empty. She'd eaten nothing since a piece of bread that morning, and that had been the last of what she had. She sat on a bench outside the general store and watched the sun slide lower. In her lap was everything she owned: the wooden spoon her mother had given her when she married, worn smooth from years of stirring pots, the cast iron skillet she'd hidden from the creditors under her bed, a change of underclothes, a hairbrush with half its bristles missing, all of it wrapped in a flour sack. A woman passing by with 2 children glanced at her, then quickly away. Clara understood that look. It was the look you gave to people who'd fallen through the cracks, the ones who'd lost their grip on respectability. It was the look that said, "That could never be me." But it could. It was. Clara stood. Her knees protested. She was tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Tired of being looked through, looked past, looked down on. Tired of this town with its closed doors and narrow minds. The West. Everyone talked about the West like it was a promise written in gold. Land for the taking, opportunity, freedom. Most of it was lies, Clara suspected, but lies sometimes had truth buried in them like bones in soup. She started walking again, this time toward the edge of town where the buildings thinned out, and the road became just two ruts heading into distance. A man on a wagon pulled up alongside her. "You need a ride, ma'am?" "How far west are you going?" He scratched his beard. 10 miles or so. Got a farm out that way." "I'll take 10 miles." He looked uncertain. She could see him weighing whether a woman her size would be too much weight for his horses, but finally nodded. "Climb on up." They rode in silence. The man didn't ask questions, which Clara appreciated. The landscape rolled past, brown fields waiting for spring, patches of snow clinging to shadowed hollows. Houses grew farther apart. The sky got bigger. When he let her off at a crossroads, she thanked him, and he tipped his hat, already turning his team around. Clara walked. Days blurred together. She slept in barns when she could, woods when she couldn't. She traded her hairbrush to a farmer's wife for bread and cheese. She asked for work at every farm, every settlement, every cluster of buildings that counted as a town. No one wanted her. "Got no money for extra help," said one farmer, not unkindly. "I need someone who can handle heavy labor," said another, looking at her body like it was the wrong kind of heavy. "My husband wouldn't approve of a strange woman living here," said a tight-faced wife. Clara kept walking. The towns got smaller, rougher. Plank buildings instead of brick. Dirt streets instead of cobblestone. Men with guns on their hips and women with hard eyes. The frontier proper, where civilization's paint was thin enough to see the wood grain underneath. She stopped in a place called Riverbend. 4 buildings and a dozen tents. The saloon keeper, a woman named Rose with dyed red hair and a business eye, looked Clara over. "You worked in a saloon before?" "No." "Can you handle drunk men?" "I can feed them." Rose laughed, but it wasn't mean. "Honey, I got a cook, Chinese fellow, good with his hands. What I need is girls for the bar in the rooms upstairs." Clara said nothing. Rose's expression softened slightly. "You could do serving, maybe. Bring food out. But you gotta understand, men come here to drink and look at pretty girls. You're not what they're paying for." "I understand." "Do you?" Rose lit a thin cigar, squinting through the smoke. "I'm not trying to be cruel, just honest. This is a business. You want honest work, try the mining camps. They're always hungry." "Where?" "North. Follow the creek about 15 miles. You'll hit Dawson's camp. After that, there's half a dozen more scattered in the mountains. Can't promise they'll take you, but miners are less particular than most." Clara thanked her and left. The walk to Dawson's camp took 2 days. Her feet blistered, then bled, then stopped hurting as much. She ate wild onions and drank from streams. At night she built small fires and held her hands close to the flames, watching sparks rise into darkness. On the second day she passed a burned homestead, just a chimney and charred beams, like ribs picked clean. A grave marker stood nearby, too weathered to read. Clara stopped, looking at it. Someone had tried here. Someone had built, planted, hoped, and the frontier had taken it all back. She kept walking. Dawson's camp was bigger than she'd expected. Maybe 30 men, a handful of rough structures, equipment everywhere. The noise hit her first. Hammering, shouting, the crash of ore being dumped into carts. It smelled like sweat and blasting powder and unwashed bodies. She found the foreman in a tent that served as an office. He was a barrel-chested man with a beard like steel wool and eyes that had seen everything twice. "I cook," Clara said before he could speak. "I'm good at it. You need someone to feed your men." He looked at her for a long moment. "You know what you're asking? This isn't town cooking. This is feeding 30 men 3 meals a day, hard work, long hours. And these boys, they're rough. They don't have manners." "I don't need manners. I need work." "We got a cook already. Old Charlie. He's been with us 2 years. Clara's heart sank, but she kept her face steady. The foreman seemed to consider something. "Charlie's getting on, though. His hands shake. Burns things. The boys complain." He scratched his beard. "Tell you what. You can help him for a week, see how it goes. Room and board, no pay. After that, if you work out, we'll talk wages." It wasn't much, but it was something. "I'll take it." He nodded. "Name's Jack Drummond. Don't make me regret this." Old Charlie turned out to be 70 if he was a day, bent like a question mark, with hands that trembled when he lifted a pot. But his eyes were sharp, and he didn't waste words. "You cooked before?" he asked, watching Clara survey the camp kitchen, a lean-to with a wood stove, a work table, and supplies stacked in crates. Every day of my life. Good. These boys eat like they got hollow legs. Breakfast is biscuits, bacon, and coffee. Lunch is stew or beans. Dinner's meat and potatoes if we got it. More beans if we don't. Nothing fancy. I don't do fancy. Charlie almost smiled. You'll do then. She started the next morning before dawn. The work was exactly as brutal as she'd expected. Hauling water, chopping wood, kneading dough until her arms screamed, standing over a stove that turned the lean-to into an oven. Charlie watched her work with the critical eye of someone who'd spent a lifetime in kitchens. Your biscuits are too wet, he said the first day. She adjusted. Coffee's weak, he said the second day. She made it stronger. By the third day, he just grunted approval and let her work. The miners ate like starving dogs. They came in shifts, muddy and exhausted, shoveling food into their mouths without tasting it. Some nodded at Clara. Most ignored her. A few made comments she pretended not to hear. Christ, Charlie, you get yourself a wife? She's big enough to be 2 wives. Long as she can cook, I don't care if she's big as a barn. Clara kept her head down and stirred the pot. On the 4th day, one of the younger miners, a boy really, maybe 19, lingered after the others had left. He had a thin face and nervous hands. Ma'am, he said. That was real good. The stew. Best I've had in months. Clara looked at him. His eyes were earnest, almost desperate for kindness. Thank you, she said. He ducked his head and hurried out. That night, alone in the small room they'd given her, barely more than a storage closet, Clara sat on the narrow cot and felt something crack open in her chest. That boy's simple gratitude, offered like a gift. It was the first time in weeks anyone had seen her as anything other than a problem to solve or an obstacle to avoid. She pressed her hands against her face and breathed slowly until the feeling passed. The week ended. Jack Drummond found her cleaning the stove after dinner. You're staying, he said without preamble. $20 a month plus room and board. Charlie says you're twice the cook he is, and he's not wrong. Relief flooded through her, but she kept her voice level. That's fair. One thing. Drummond shifted his weight. Some of the boys have been talking. They like your cooking, but they think maybe you're too much woman for a camp like this. They're worried about... He stopped, looking uncomfortable. About what? About trouble. You're female. They're men. Things can get complicated. Clara met his eyes. I'm here to cook, Mr. Drummond. Nothing else. If your men can't handle that, that's their problem, not mine. He studied her, then nodded slowly. Fair enough, long as we understand each other. 3 months passed. Winter loosened its grip, and the camp hummed with activity. Clara learned the rhythms, the early morning quiet before the men woke, the midday rush, the evening exhaustion when everyone was too tired to talk much. She learned which miners liked extra coffee, which ones needed bigger portions, which ones had families back east they didn't talk about. Charlie's hands got worse. He started dropping things, burning himself on the stove. One morning, he didn't show up at all. Clara found him in his bunk, gray-faced and struggling to breathe. Get Drummond, she told one of the miners. They buried Charlie 3 days later on a hill overlooking the camp. The men stood around the grave with their hats in their hands, and someone said a few words Clara didn't listen to. She was thinking about Charlie teaching her to make sourdough, the way his whole face changed when he smiled, which wasn't often. After that, the kitchen was hers alone. She worked harder than she'd ever worked. Up at 4, asleep by 10 if she was lucky. Her hands were permanently stained and calloused. Her back ached constantly. But the men ate, and they ate well. And slowly she felt something shift, not just in them, but in herself. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was necessary. Then one afternoon in early June, a rider came through camp. Clara was outside scrubbing pots when she heard the horse, looked up to see a lean man in dusty clothes talking to Drummond. They spoke for several minutes, the stranger gesturing toward the mountains. Finally, Drummond called her over. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Sam Hartley. He's foreman at the Ward Ranch up in the high country. Says they're looking for a cook. Clara looked at the man, Sam. He had a weathered face and careful eyes. We lost our cook 2 weeks back, Sam said. Ran off with a gambler, if you can believe it. Boss has been making do, but he can't keep it up. It's a working ranch. Cattle, timber, whatever needs doing. About 15 men most of the year, 20 during drives. Pays better than mine work, but it's remote. Real remote. How remote? Nearest town is a day's ride. Ranch is another half day beyond that. You'd be the only woman. Boss isn't easy. Place isn't comfortable. But the work's steady, and if you can handle rough men and rough living, it might suit you. Clara looked at Drummond. He shrugged. Your choice. You do good here, but if you want steadier, ranch work's not bad. Ward's got a reputation for being hard but fair. What's the pay? Clara asked. 30 a month, room and board. Boss gives you a week to prove yourself. After that, you're in or you're out. Clara thought about the mining camp, the noise, the dirt, the way everything smelled like blasting powder and desperation. She thought about winter coming, about being alone in a lean-to with a wood stove while snow piled up outside. I'll go, she said. Sam nodded like he'd expected nothing else. We leave at dawn. Bring what you need. It's a 2-day ride. That night, Clara packed her few belongings back into the flour sack. The wooden spoon, the skillet, a spare dress one of the miners' wives had given her. A few dollars she'd managed to save. One of the younger miners, the same boy who'd thanked her months ago, knocked on her door. Ma'am, we heard you're leaving. I am. We wanted to... He held out a cloth bundle, his face red. It's not much, just some things. For the road. Inside was dried meat, hard cheese, and a small tin of coffee. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you, she managed. You're the best cook we ever had, the boy said earnestly. Best one we'll ever have, probably. After he left, Clara sat on the cot and held the bundle in her lap. These men, rough, crude, often cruel, had given her a place when no one else would. They'd eaten her food and slept well because of it, and somehow that had mattered enough that they'd scraped together provisions they couldn't really spare. It wasn't much, but it was something. The ride to the Ward Ranch was long and hard. Sam didn't talk much, which suited Clara fine. They followed trails that barely deserved the name, climbing higher into mountains that seemed to go on forever. The air got thinner. The trees got taller. On the second afternoon, they crested a ridge, and Sam pointed. There. The ranch sprawled across a valley like something that had grown out of the ground rather than been built on it. Buildings clustered together, main house, bunkhouse, barn, outbuildings, all rough timber and stone. Beyond them, fences marked pastures where cattle grazed. Mountains rose on all sides, steep and dark with pine. It looked hard. It looked lonely. It looked like exactly the kind of place that would break a person who wasn't already broken. They rode down. Men stopped what they were doing to watch them pass. Clara felt their eyes following her, measuring, judging. Sam led her to the main house, a 2-story structure with a wide porch and windows that needed washing. Boss is in the barn, Sam said. Wait here. Clara stood on the porch, her flour sack in her hands, and looked at the valley. The sun was setting, turning the mountains purple and gold. It was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with softness or comfort. Beautiful like a knife blade, like something that would cut you if you grabbed it wrong. Footsteps. She turned. The man walking toward her was tall and lean, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to show anything but stone. He moved like someone who'd spent his life working, economical, purposeful. When he stopped in front of her, his eyes were flat and assessing. You're the cook, he said. It wasn't a question. Clara Whitmore. Caleb Ward. He looked her over the same way the foreman at Dawson's camp had, but harder, like he was looking for cracks. Sam says you worked the mine camp. 3 months. Before that? Wherever I could. Something flickered in his expression. Maybe approval, maybe just acknowledgement. Kitchen's in the main house. You get the back room. Meals are 5 in the morning, noon, and 6 at night. Anything else, you figure it out. You got 7 days to show me you can do this. On the 8th day, if you're still here, you're hired. If not, Sam will take you back down. Understood? Understood. He turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. The men work hard here. They need food that'll keep them going, not pretty plates. You cook to fill bellies, not impress anyone. Can you do that? Clara met his eyes. That's all I've ever done. For the first time, something that might have been the ghost of a smile touched his face. It was gone before she could be sure. We'll see, he said, and walked away. Clara stood alone on the porch as darkness settled over the valley. Somewhere a cow lowed. Wind moved through the pines like breathing. She gripped her flour sack tighter and felt the weight of the wooden spoon inside, her mother's spoon worn smooth by years of work. 7 days. She'd survived worse. Clara picked up her bag and walked into the house to find her kitchen. The kitchen was a disaster. Clara stood in the doorway holding an oil lamp, its light pushing weakly against the dark. Dirty pots piled in the basin. Grease coated the stove. The floor was sticky under her boots. A mouse skittered across the counter and disappeared behind a sack of flour that had split open, spilling white powder across everything. She set the lamp down and rolled up her sleeves. The back room was worse. A narrow space with a cot that sagged in the middle, a cracked mirror on the wall, and a single window filmed with grime. But it had a door that closed, and after months in the mining camp where privacy meant turning your back, that felt like luxury. Clara dropped her flour sack on the cot and returned to the kitchen. 4 in the morning would come whether she was ready or not, and right now nothing was ready. She started with the stove, scraping away layers of burnt food and grease. Her hands were black within minutes. The work was mindless, mechanical, and that suited her fine. Thinking too much about the next 7 days would only make it harder. 2 hours passed. The kitchen slowly emerged from under the filth. Not clean, not yet, but functional. Clara found supplies in the pantry: flour, salt, lard, dried beans, potatoes, onions, coffee, sides of bacon hanging from hooks, a haunch of venison that needed using soon. Basic staples, nothing fancy, exactly what Ward had said. She built up the fires in the stove and started coffee. While it brewed, she mixed biscuit dough, her hands working from memory: flour, lard, salt, buttermilk from the cold box. The rhythm was familiar, comforting. This she knew. This she could do. By the time boots started thumping on the porch, biscuits were in the oven and bacon sizzled in the skillet. Clara had found plates, mismatched, chipped, and set them out on the long table in the dining room. Coffee steamed in tin cups. The men came in like a wave, bringing cold air and the smell of horses. They stopped when they saw her, uncertainty crossing their faces. She counted 12 of them, all sizes and ages, all watching her with the same guarded expression. "Sit," Clara said. "Food's ready." They sat slowly, still watching. Clara brought out the biscuits, golden brown, steam rising when she split them, and bacon piled on a platter. She set down a bowl of gravy without comment and returned to the kitchen for more coffee. When she came back, they were eating. Not talking, just eating. She refilled cups and watched their faces. Some of them looked surprised. One older man with a gray beard closed his eyes when he bit into a biscuit, and Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Ward came in last. He moved to the head of the table and stood there, looking at the food, at the men eating, at Clara. His face gave nothing away. "Coffee," he said. She poured. Their eyes met briefly. His were the color of winter sky, cold and distant. He drank, still watching her over the rim of the cup. "Biscuits are decent," one of the men ventured. "They're better than decent," another said. "They're goddamn good." "Watch your mouth," Ward said quietly. The man shut up. Clara returned to the kitchen. Through the doorway, she could hear them starting to talk, voices low at first, then gradually louder. The sound of men eating well, warming up, coming alive. It was a sound she'd learned to listen for, the sound of success. Ward appeared in the kitchen doorway. "You got dinner planned?" "Venison stew, biscuits, pie if there's time." "Pie from what?" "Dried apples in the pantry." He considered this. Men expect meat and potatoes. They don't need pie. "They don't need a lot of things," Clara said, scrubbing the bacon skillet. "Doesn't mean it won't help." "Help what?" She looked at him. "Help them work better. Help them complain less. Help them remember why staying here beats drifting." Ward's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "You think you're that good?" "I think food matters more than most people realize." He almost smiled. Almost. Then he turned and left. The morning passed in a blur of work. Clara cleaned while a pot of beans simmered for lunch. She scrubbed the floor, washed windows, organized the pantry. The mouse appeared again, and she set a trap, feeling only mildly guilty. By noon, the kitchen looked like a kitchen instead of a place where cooking happened accidentally. Lunch was simple: beans, cornbread, coffee. The men ate quickly, needing to get back to work. Clara noticed Ward didn't sit with them. He took his plate and ate standing on the porch, looking out at the valley. Afternoon was for dinner preparation. Clara butchered the venison haunch, cutting away the parts that had started to turn and saving the good meat. She chopped onions until her eyes streamed, added carrots and potatoes, built the stew layer by layer. The dried apples went into a bowl of water to soften. The kitchen grew warm. Steam fogged the windows. Clara's hair stuck to her forehead, and her dress clung to her back, but she kept working. The stew needed time to cook slow, to let the flavors marry. The pie crust had to be just right, not too thick, not too thin. Sam came in around 4, hat in his hands. "Smells good." "It will be." "Boss is watching you, you know. He's hard to please." Clara turned the stew, breathing in the rich smell. "Everyone's hard to please until they're not." Sam laughed. "You might be all right, Mrs. Whitmore." Dinner was at 6 exactly. The men came in tired and hungry, and when Clara set the stew down, one of them actually groaned. They ate like they were trying to finish before someone took it away. The biscuits had disappeared. The pie, cut into generous slices, topped with cream she'd found in the cold box, vanished in minutes. "Jesus," someone said. "When's the last time we had pie?" "Year ago, at least," another answered. "Maybe longer." Ward ate without speaking, but Clara saw him take a second piece of pie. When he finished, he stood and looked at her directly for the first time all day. "Kitchen looks better." "It should." "Food's acceptable." Clara met his eyes. "It's better than acceptable, and you know it." The room went quiet. The men stopped eating, stopped moving. Sam's eyes went wide. Ward stared at her. Clara stared back. She was too tired to be diplomatic, too sore to care about impressing him. If he wanted to fire her for telling the truth, so be it. Then Ward did something unexpected. He laughed, just once, short and sharp, like the sound had surprised him as much as everyone else. "You're right," he said. "It is better than acceptable." He looked at the men. "Anyone disagrees?" They shook their heads quickly. "Good." Ward nodded at Clara. 6 more days. Then he walked out. The men started talking all at once, voices overlapping. "Did you see his face? She's got guts. Pie was worth it." Sam stayed behind after the others left, helping Clara clear plates. "That was either really brave or really stupid." "Maybe both," Clara said. "Boss doesn't laugh. Hasn't. Not since—" Sam stopped himself. "Since what?" "Not my story to tell." He stacked plates carefully. "But you should know. He's got his reasons for being the way he is. Place wasn't always this quiet." Clara wanted to ask more, but Sam was already heading for the door. "Good night, Mrs. Whitmore. You survived day 1. She cleaned the kitchen until everything was in its place, then dragged herself to the back room. Her body ached everywhere. She collapsed on the cot without bothering to undress and fell asleep to the sound of wind in the pines. The second day started the same as the first, except this time Clara knew where everything was. She made flapjacks and sausage, strong coffee, eggs scrambled with cheese she'd found aging in the cold box. The men came in less wary, almost eager. They talked while they ate, and one of them, a young man with red hair, actually said good morning to her. Ward came in, poured his own coffee, and left without a word. By the third day, patterns emerged. The men had names now, not just faces. There was Red, the young one, and Tom, the older man with the gray beard who always thanked her. Miguel, who was quiet but smiled when the food was good. Jack, who complained about everything except the meals. A dozen others she was learning piece by piece. She learned other things too. The ranch ran on a strict schedule. Work started at dawn, broke for lunch, continued until dark. Ward was everywhere, fixing fence, moving cattle, chopping wood. He never stopped, never slowed. The men respected him. She could see that. But there was distance, too. They didn't joke with him, didn't linger in his presence. Clara made beef stew for dinner that night, thick and rich, served with fresh bread she'd baked from a sourdough starter she'd found forgotten in the pantry. She revived it carefully, feeding it flour and water, coaxing it back to life. The bread came out perfect, crusty outside, soft inside, with that particular sour tang that made everything taste better. Tom nearly wept when he tasted it. "My mother used to make bread like this." "Where's your mother now?" Clara asked. "Dead 20 years. He looked at the bread like it was something precious. "But I can still remember her kitchen, still remember this smell." That night, after cleaning up, Clara found Ward on the porch again. He was sitting in a chair that had seen better years, smoking a pipe, staring at nothing. "Mr. Ward?" He glanced at her. "Something wrong?" "No, just wanted to ask about supplies. We're low on flour, sugar, could use more coffee." "Make a list. Sam will ride to town next week." Clara hesitated, then sat on the porch steps. Her legs needed the rest, and she was tired of standing. Ward didn't object, so she stayed. "Men seem happier," she said. "Men are always happier when they're well fed. It's more than that." He drew on his pipe, exhaled smoke. "What do you want, Mrs. Whitmore? Compliments?" "I want to understand this place." "Why?" "Because I might be here for a while." "You got 4 more days to prove that." Clara looked out at the valley. The sun was setting again, painting everything gold in shadow. "What happened here?" "What do you mean?" "Sam said it wasn't always this quiet. The kitchen was a mess. The men eat like they expect food to disappear. Something happened." Ward was silent for a long time. Clara thought he wasn't going to answer, and she was already standing to leave when he spoke. "Had a wife. Sarah. She ran the house, kept things alive." His voice was flat, like he was reading from a list. 3 years ago, there was a fire. Barn burned. She was inside trying to get the horses out. Didn't make it. Clara's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago." 3 years isn't long. Long enough. He tapped his pipe against the porch rail, knocking out ash. "After that, things fell apart. Men drifted off. Kitchen went to hell. Hired a woman from town, but she couldn't handle it. Ran off with that gambler Sam mentioned. Been making do since then." "Making do isn't living," Clara said quietly. Ward looked at her then, really looked, and his eyes were colder than she'd seen them. "You've been here 3 days, Mrs. Whitmore. Don't presume to tell me how to live." She stood. "You're right. Apologies, Mr. Ward." She went inside before he could respond. The 4th day, Clara made ham and eggs for breakfast. Fried potatoes, more of the sourdough bread toasted and buttered. The men were talking now, laughing even. The dining room felt warmer, less like a place where people refueled and more like a place where they gathered. Ward sat at the head of the table, eating mechanically, not participating in the conversation, but not stopping it either. Red looked at Clara. "Mrs. Whitmore, this bread, you could sell this in town." "I'm not in town." "You could be. Someone with your skills—" "I'm here," Clara interrupted gently. "That's enough." After breakfast, she decided to tackle the pantry properly. It needed organizing, inventory, deep cleaning. She was elbow-deep in flour sacks when she heard shouting outside. Through the window, she saw 2 men squaring off in the yard. One was Jack, the complainer. The other was Miguel. Ward was already there, moving between them. "That's enough," Ward's voice carried clearly. "He called me lazy," Jack said, face red. "You are lazy," Miguel shot back. "I fixed the fence you said you fixed. Half the posts were loose." "I did what I could." "You did half." Miguel's accent got thicker when he was angry. "Always half. Always excuses." "I said that's enough." Ward's tone could have frozen water. "Jack, you redo that fence today. Properly. Miguel, you're with Sam moving the herd to the north pasture. Both of you get out of my sight." They left, still glaring at each other. Ward stood in the yard for a moment, hands on his hips, looking tired. Then he walked toward the barn without glancing at the house. At lunch, the mood was tense. Jack and Miguel sat at opposite ends of the table. No one talked much. Clara served chicken and dumplings, comfort food, the kind meant to settle nerves, but even that didn't break the silence. After the men left, Tom stayed behind, helping Clara clear plates again. "Don't mind them," he said. "Happens sometimes. Men get cooped up, get on each other's nerves." "They need something to work toward," Clara said. "Something besides just getting through." "What do you mean?" She wasn't sure herself, but the thought had been forming. They need to feel like they're building something. Right now, it's just survival. Wake up, work, eat, sleep. That's not enough. Tom considered this. "You might be right. Place used to have more life. Mrs. Ward, she organized things. Celebrations, gatherings. Made it feel like more than just work." "What kind of celebrations?" "Harvest dinners, Christmas, 4th of July. Nothing fancy, but it mattered. Gave us something to look forward to." After Tom left, Clara stood in the kitchen thinking. 7 days wasn't enough time to fix what was broken here, but maybe it was enough to start. Maybe that's all anyone could do. Start. The 5th day, she made cinnamon rolls for breakfast. It took extra time, extra effort, but when the men came in and smelled them, their faces changed. Red actually grinned. Are those? Sit down and eat, Clara said. They devoured the rolls, the sweetness and spice, a sharp contrast to the usual savory breakfasts. Even Jack seemed to forget he was angry. Ward ate 3, which was the most Clara had seen him eat of anything. Where'd you learn to cook like this? Red asked. My mother. Then my husband's mother. Then myself. You married? Was. Widowed. Sorry, Clara shrugged. Life happens to everyone. That afternoon, she made an extra trip to the cold box and found venison roast she'd been saving. She prepared it slowly, carefully, rubbed with herbs, seared, then roasted until it was tender enough to fall apart. She made potatoes mashed with butter and cream, carrots glazed with honey, more bread. When she served it at dinner, the men stared. What's the occasion? Tom asked. No occasion, just food. This is... Red struggled for words. This is restaurant food. It's Thursday food, Clara corrected. Eat it before it gets cold. They ate. The dining room filled with the sounds of satisfaction, forks scraping plates, men going back for seconds, quiet groans of pleasure. Clara watched from the kitchen doorway, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Ward came into the kitchen after dinner. He stood there, not speaking, until Clara turned to face him. That meal, he said slowly. That was food, Clara finished. No, that was more than food. He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't used to whatever he was trying to say. The men are talking, they're laughing, they're not at each other's throats. That's what happens when people are fed properly. It's more than that, and you know it. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. Then what is it, Mr. Ward? It's hope, he said quietly. You're feeding them hope. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Then Ward cleared his throat and stepped back. 2 more days, he said. But between you and me, Mrs. Whitmore, you've already earned the job. He left before she could respond. The 6th day brought rain, cold, steady rain that turned the yard to mud and kept the men inside longer than usual. They were restless at breakfast, eager to get to work despite the weather. Clara made them a hot meal that would stick, sausage gravy over biscuits, fried eggs, coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Ward pulled her aside before she started lunch preparations. Storm's getting worse. Men'll be soaked by evening. Make something hot. I was planning to. Good. He hesitated. You're doing well here. Just want you to know that. It was the closest thing to praise she'd gotten from him. Clara nodded. Thank you. The rain hammered down all day. By evening, the men came in looking like drowned rats tracking mud everywhere Clara had cleaned. She bit back her frustration and served beef and barley soup, thick enough to be stew, with cornbread that soaked up the broth. They ate gratefully, warming up, coming back to life. Miguel and Jack sat near each other without fighting. Red told a story about a horse that made everyone laugh. The dining room steamed with wet clothes and body heat, and something else, something that felt almost like family. Ward ate his soup silently, but Clara saw him watching the men, and his face held an expression she hadn't seen before, something softer, something almost peaceful. That night the storm grew worse. Wind screamed around the house, rattling windows. Lightning split the sky. Clara lay in her cot listening to the rage outside and thought about storms she'd weathered before. Her husband's death, the long walk west, the endless rejection. This was just weather. She'd survived worse. The 7th day dawned clear and cold, the storm blown out. Everything sparkled with frost. The men were in good spirits at breakfast, talking about the work ahead, about fixing what the storm had damaged. Clara made them a feast. Ham steaks, scrambled eggs, hash browns, flapjacks, the last of the cinnamon rolls. She wanted this meal to matter, to mark the end of her trial week. They ate like it was their last meal on Earth. Mrs. Whitmore, Tom said when she refilled his coffee, speaking for all of us, we hope you stay. Hear, hear, someone else said. Clara felt her throat tighten. I hope so too. Ward came in last again, as always. But this time, when he sat down, he looked at her directly. 7 days, he said. The room went quiet. You've done what I asked. You've done more than I asked. He picked up his fork, set it down again. You're hired, Mrs. Whitmore. 30 a month, room and board. Like Sam said, welcome to Ward Ranch. The men cheered. Red pounded the table. Tom wiped his eyes. Clara stood there, flour-dusted and exhausted, and feeling something enormous rising in her chest. Thank you, she managed. Ward almost smiled. Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. You've given us something we didn't know we were missing. After breakfast, after the men had gone back to work, Clara stepped outside. The valley spread before her, mountains rising on all sides, the sky impossibly blue. Everything was clean from the rain, new-washed and gleaming. She'd done it. She'd earned this place. But as she turned to go back inside, she noticed something. The barn, the one Ward's wife had died in, stood at the far end of the yard. It had been rebuilt, obviously, but it looked neglected. The door hung crooked. Weeds grew around the foundation. Sam was walking past, and Clara called to him. That barn, why doesn't Ward fix it properly? Sam glanced at it, then away. Can't. Won't go near it. Men handle the animals now, keep equipment elsewhere. He hasn't set foot in there since the fire, but he rebuilt it. Had to. Ranch needs a barn, but building it and using it are different things. Sam lowered his voice. There's ghosts in there for him, Mrs. Whitmore. Some things don't rebuild easy as walls. Clara looked at the barn, at its crooked door and wounded foundation, and understood. This ranch was like that barn, functional but broken, rebuilt but not healed. She thought about Ward's cold eyes, the men's careful distance, the kitchen that had been neglected for 3 years. All of it made sense now. They were surviving, but they weren't living. And maybe, just maybe, she could help change that. But that would take more than good food. That would take time, patience, and a kind of courage Clara wasn't sure she had. She went back into the kitchen, rolling up her sleeves. The lunch menu needed planning. There was bread to bake, stew to prepare. Work didn't stop just because she'd been hired. But as she worked, her mind kept returning to that barn, to Sam's words about ghosts, to the way Ward had looked when he talked about his wife. Some things don't rebuild easy as walls. Maybe not. But they could be rebuilt. Everything could, given enough time and enough hands willing to do the work. Clara kneaded dough, feeling the rhythm steady her thoughts. She'd come here with nothing but a wooden spoon and a skillet. She'd earned her place through food and stubbornness. Now she was part of this ranch, this broken place full of wounded men. And for the first time since Thomas died, Clara felt something she'd almost forgotten. She felt like she belonged somewhere. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost like peace. Clara woke before dawn, built the fire, started coffee. The men came in at 5 sharp, ate whatever she'd prepared, and headed out to work. She spent her days cooking, cleaning, planning the next meal. At night, she fell into bed exhausted and dreamless. But beneath the routine, something was shifting. The men talked more now. They lingered over meals, told stories, argued about things that didn't matter. Red started bringing wildflowers to put on the dining table, scraggly things he picked on his way back from wherever he'd been working. Tom carved a new spoon rest when he noticed Clara's was cracked. Miguel fixed the squeaky hinge on the pantry door without being asked. Small things, but they added up. Ward remained distant, though Clara caught him watching sometimes. Not her specifically. He'd watch the men eating, talking, being alive in a way they hadn't been before. His expression during these moments was hard to read, somewhere between satisfaction and pain. She didn't push. Some men needed space the way others needed closeness. 3 weeks into her employment, Sam rode to town for supplies. He returned late afternoon with a wagon full of flour, sugar, coffee, and other staples Clara had requested. But he also brought something else, a letter. From town, he said, handing it to Clara. Postmaster said it came for the ranch. No name on it except Cook. Clara took it, frowning. Who would write to her here? She opened it in the kitchen, alone. The handwriting was cramped and hurried. Mrs. Whitmore. Heard you was at Ward Ranch. I'm in Bellevue, 2 days south. Got a restaurant needs a cook. Pays $40 a month. You interested? Come see me. Frank Morrison. She read it twice, then folded it and tucked it into her apron pocket. 40 a month was good money. 10 more than she was making now. A restaurant meant a town, civilization, other women. It meant not being alone on a mountain with 15 men and an employer who barely spoke to her. It meant leaving. Clara looked around the kitchen. Her kitchen now, really. Clean, organized, smelling of bread and coffee. Through the window, she could see the valley, the mountains, the impossible sky. She could hear the men outside, their voices carrying on the wind. This place had given her something. Maybe it wasn't much by most standards, but it was hers. She took the letter from her pocket, walked to the stove, and dropped it into the fire. It curled and blackened and disappeared. That evening at dinner, Ward asked if the supplies were adequate. "Everything I needed," Clara said. "Sam did well." "Good." Ward cut his beef methodically. "He mention anything from town?" "Some gossip, nothing important. If Ward noticed she was lying, he didn't say. But his eyes lingered on her face for a moment longer than necessary. The next day brought new problems. Jack didn't show up for breakfast. His place at the table sat empty, and the men exchanged glances but didn't comment. Clara noticed Ward's jaw tighten. After the meal, Ward pulled Sam aside. Clara heard fragments of their conversation through the open window. Drinking again. Warned him, "Can't keep doing this." An hour later, Sam returned with Jack stumbling beside him, reeking of whiskey. Ward met them in the yard. Clara watched from the kitchen, pretending to work. "Where were you?" Ward's voice was dangerously quiet. "Town," Jack slurred. "Needed a drink." "You need a job, but you won't have one much longer if this continues." "Always the same with you," Jack said, suddenly angry. "Work, work, work. Never any life, never any fun. This place is dead, Ward. It died with your—" Ward hit him. Not hard, just enough to shut him up. Jack staggered back, hand to his mouth, eyes wide with shock. "Get out," Ward said. "Boss, I didn't mean—" "Get your things. You're done." Sam stepped forward. "Boss, he's drunk. He doesn't know what he's saying." "He knows." Ward's face was stone. "He's been saying it for months, just not out loud. Now he has, and he's done." Jack left within the hour. Clara watched him ride away, his belongings tied behind his saddle, shoulders hunched against the wind. She felt sorry for him, but she understood Ward's decision. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. That night, the dinner table felt emptier. The men ate quietly, tension thick as smoke. Clara served pot roast and potatoes, but even good food couldn't cut through the mood. Ward finished first and stood. "Mrs. Whitmore, a word in the kitchen." She followed him, drying her hands on her apron. He stood by the window, looking out at nothing. "That letter Sam brought. What was it?" Clara hesitated, then decided truth was easier. "Job offer. Restaurant in Bellevue. More money. You considering it?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I burned it." Ward turned to look at her, and for the first time since she'd arrived, his expression showed something other than cold control. Surprise, maybe. Or confusion. 40 a month is good money, he said. So is 30 when it comes with a place you don't want to leave. This isn't... He stopped, started again. "This place isn't easy, Mrs. Whitmore. It's remote, lonely. The winters are brutal. You could do better." "Better how? Cooking in a restaurant where nobody knows my name? Serving strangers who'll forget me the moment they leave?" Clara shook her head. "I did that already, Mr. Ward. Spent years being invisible. I'm not invisible here." "No," he said quietly. "You're not." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Ward cleared his throat. "I shouldn't have hit Jack. Probably not. But I'm not sorry I did. I don't expect you to be." Ward almost smiled. "You're an unusual woman, Mrs. Whitmore." "So I've been told." He left, and Clara returned to the dining room to clear dishes. The men were still sitting there, talking in low voices. When she approached, they went quiet. "Something on your minds?" she asked. Tom spoke carefully. "We were just saying what Jack said about the place being dead. He was wrong." "Way wrong," Red added. "Place feels more alive now than it has in years." "Because of you," Miguel said. "You brought—" He searched for the word. "Light? You brought light here." Clara's throat tightened. "I just cook." It's more than cooking, Tom insisted. You made this feel like a home again, like a place worth being. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and kept collecting plates, blinking against the sudden burning in her eyes. Later, alone in her room, Clara sat on the cot and thought about what Tom had said. Light. She'd brought light. The idea seemed absurd. She was just a widow with a wooden spoon, doing the only thing she knew how to do. But maybe that was enough. Maybe light didn't have to be complicated. The following weeks brought the full weight of summer. The sun rose early and set late, stretching the days into something that felt endless. The men worked from dawn to dark, moving cattle, repairing fences, cutting hay. Clara fed them breakfasts that would sustain them, lunches they could eat quickly, dinners that would help them sleep. But she also started doing something else. Small things, like Tom had said, things that added up. She baked cookies and left them out for the men to grab between meals. She started keeping cold water in the shade of the porch for when they came in from the fields. She learned their preferences. Tom liked his coffee with extra sugar. Miguel wouldn't touch anything with raisins. Red had a sweet tooth that could never be fully satisfied. And slowly, carefully, she started asking questions about their lives before the ranch, about their families, their hopes, their reasons for being here in the middle of nowhere. Tom had a daughter back east he hadn't seen in 5 years. He sent her half his wages every month. Saving up, he told Clara. When I got enough, I'm going back. Gonna meet my grandson. He'll be 3 years old and he won't know me, but I'm gonna meet him anyway. Miguel had come north from Texas after his wife died in childbirth. Too many ghosts there, he said simply. Needed to be somewhere else. Red was running from something he wouldn't name. Did something I'm not proud of, was all he'd say. Figured the frontier was far enough to outrun it. Each story was a weight they'd been carrying alone. Clara listened, asked gentle questions, and never judged. She understood about ghosts and running and the things people did to survive. Ward remained the one person she couldn't crack. He was polite, even appreciative of her work, but he never lingered, never talked about anything beyond the immediate needs of the ranch. The wall around him was thick and high. Then came the day everything changed. It started with smoke. Clara was in the pantry taking inventory when she smelled it, faint at first, then stronger. She stepped outside and saw it immediately. Black smoke rising from the direction of the barn. She ran. The barn was already engulfed, flames climbing the walls, eating through the roof. Men were shouting, running with buckets, but the fire was too big, too fast. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. Where was Ward? She found him standing 30 feet from the barn, frozen, just standing there, staring at the flames while chaos erupted around him. Mr. Ward! She grabbed his arm. He didn't move, didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on the fire, and in them Clara saw something terrible. He wasn't seeing this barn. He was seeing another fire, another day, 3 years ago. Caleb! She shook him harder, using his first name without thinking. Caleb, look at me! He blinked, focused on her face. His eyes were empty. The horses, he said hoarsely. Sarah went in for the horses. That was then. This is now. Your men need you. He just stared at her. Clara made a decision. She turned away from Ward and ran toward the men. They were disorganized, panicked, accomplishing nothing. Tom, she shouted. Organize a bucket line from the water trough. Miguel, Red, start wetting down the other buildings. If this spreads, we lose everything. They stared at her. Now. Her voice cracked like a whip. They moved. Tom started shouting orders, getting men into position. Miguel and Red grabbed buckets and ran for the bunkhouse. The chaos resolved into purpose. Clara ran back to the house, grabbed every pot and bucket she could find, and hauled them to the trough. Her arms screamed with the effort, but she didn't stop. She filled containers, passed them down the line, took the empty ones back, filled them again. The heat was incredible. Sweat poured down her face, soaked through her dress. Embers flew through the air like angry insects. The barn groaned and shuddered, preparing to collapse. Everyone back, Sam shouted. It's coming down. They scrambled away just as the roof gave in with a roar like thunder. Flames shot 50 feet into the air. The impact sent sparks everywhere, and Clara saw one land on the bunkhouse roof. There, she pointed. The bunkhouse! Red was already climbing up, beating at the ember with a wet blanket. It went out. Another landed nearby. Another. The men moved like machines now, working together, covering every threat. Gradually, impossibly, they got control. The barn burned to its foundation, but the fire didn't spread. The other buildings stood intact. By the time the flames died down to smoking rubble, everyone was black with soot and staggering with exhaustion. Clara sat down hard on the ground, her legs giving out. Her hands were blistered. Her throat burned from smoke. But they'd done it. They'd stopped it. Ward appeared through the smoke like a ghost. He was still pale, still shaken, but present now. He looked at the ruins of the barn, then at his men, then at Clara. "You," he said. His voice was rough. "You took command. Someone had to. That should have been me. You weren't able." She met his eyes. "It happens." "No." He shook his head. "It shouldn't. I'm the boss. I'm supposed to—" He stopped, looked at the rubble again. I froze. I saw the fire and I wasn't here. I was back there 3 years ago and I couldn't— "But we're here now," Claire interrupted, "and we're all alive. That's what matters." Ward looked at her for a long moment and something in his face finally broke. Not dramatically, not obviously, but Clara saw it. The smallest crack in that stone wall. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for giving me a place to stand," Claire replied. The men gathered around them, all of them smoke-stained and exhausted. They looked at each other, at Clara, at Ward, and something unspoken passed between them. They'd faced disaster together. They'd survived it together. Sam clapped Ward on the shoulder. "We'll rebuild, boss. Better than before." Tom nodded. "Stronger foundation this time. Won't burn so easy." Ward looked around at all of them, his men, his ranch, this life he'd tried so hard to just survive. "Yeah," he said, and his voice was steadier. "We will." That night, nobody wanted to be alone. They gathered in the dining room, too wired to sleep, and Clara made coffee and whatever food she could throw together. Nobody complained that it wasn't a proper meal. They just sat together, talking, processing what had happened. "I thought we were done," Red admitted. "When I saw that barn go up, thought the whole place would burn." "Would have, if Mrs. Whitmore hadn't taken charge," Tom said. Clara waved this away. "You all did the work." "But you told us what work to do," Miguel pointed out. "We were running in circles. You made us into a line." Ward sat at the head of the table, quiet. He'd washed the worst of the soot off, but his eyes still held that haunted look. Clara caught his gaze once, and he held it for a moment before looking away. Around midnight, the men finally drifted off to the bunkhouse. Sam stayed behind to help Clara clean up. "Boss didn't handle that well," he said quietly. "He handled it how he could." "He froze, Mrs. Whitmore. If you hadn't been there—" "But I was there. That's enough." Sam studied her. "You care about him." It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. "I care about all of you. This place, it's given me something I needed. I don't want to see it burn." "It's more than that." Maybe it was. But Clara wasn't ready to examine that truth too closely, so she just kept wiping down the table until Sam gave up and left. Ward was still sitting there when she finished. She'd thought he'd gone, but he'd stayed, silent in the shadows. "You should sleep," Clara said. "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see it." "The fire today or the fire before?" "Both." He rubbed his face. "I thought I was past it, thought I'd dealt with it, but when I saw those flames, it was like no time had passed at all. I was right back there, watching the barn burn, knowing she was inside, knowing I couldn't—" His voice broke. Clara sat down across from him. "You couldn't save her," she said gently. "That's not your fault. I should have been faster, should have seen the fire sooner, should have done impossible things," Clara interrupted. "Mr. Ward, you're human. Humans can't do the impossible. We just do what we can with what we have." "It wasn't enough. It never feels like enough when someone dies. I spent months after my husband passed thinking of all the things I could have done differently, could have noticed he was sick sooner, could have found a better doctor, could have—" She stopped. "But none of it would have changed anything. Death comes when it comes. All we can do is keep living after." Ward looked at her with those winter sky eyes, and for the first time she saw real pain in them. Not hidden, not controlled, just there, raw and honest. I don't know if I can rebuild that barn, he said. Every time I look at where it was, then don't look at where it was. Look at where it will be. It won't be the same barn. It'll be a new one. Different foundation, different wood, different purpose. Clara leaned forward. You can't change the past, Mr. Ward. You can only build something new from what's left. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. You're right. I usually am about practical matters. That got the ghost of a smile from him. You're unusual, Mrs. Whitmore. You've said that before. Doesn't make it less true. He stood, suddenly awkward. I should let you rest. Long day. Long day, Clara agreed. He started toward the door, then paused. Mrs. Whitmore, Clara, thank you for today. For, he gestured vaguely, unable to articulate it. For everything. It was the first time he'd used her first name. Clara felt something shift in her chest, something warm and dangerous. You're welcome, Caleb. He left, and Clara sat alone in the quiet kitchen, listening to the house settle around her. Outside, the ruins of the barn still smoked, sending up thin wisps that disappeared into the night sky. Everything had changed today. The men had seen their boss vulnerable, had seen Clara step into the gap. They'd worked together in a way they never had before. And the wall between Ward, Caleb, and the rest of the world had finally cracked. Clara didn't know what would grow from that crack. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. She stood and stretched, her body protesting every movement. Burns and bruises would hurt worse tomorrow, but she'd survived worse pain than this. In her room, she lay down without undressing and stared at the ceiling. Her mother's wooden spoon sat on the small table by the cot, worn smooth from decades of use. Clara reached out and touched it, drawing comfort from the familiar shape. We're still here, Mama, she whispered, still standing. The spoon didn't answer, but Clara felt the truth of it anyway. She was still here, still standing, still building something from what was left. And tomorrow, they'd all wake up and do it again. The next morning came too soon. Clara dragged herself out of bed, body screaming protest at every movement. Her hands were blistered, her throat raw, her muscles stiff. But the men needed breakfast, and pain had never been a good enough reason to stop working. She made it simple. Oatmeal, bacon, coffee, nothing fancy. The men came in quiet, subdued, still processing yesterday. They ate without much talk, exhaustion evident in every line of their bodies. Caleb came in last. He looked like he hadn't slept at all, dark circles under his eyes, movements slower than usual. But his face was set with determination. After breakfast, he said to the room at large, we start clearing the barn site. Salvage what we can. Make a plan for rebuilding. The men nodded. And he paused, looked uncomfortable. I owe you all an apology. Yesterday I didn't lead when you needed me to. That won't happen again. Boss, Tom said carefully, we all got our demons. Nothing to apologize for. There's everything to apologize for. But I'll make it right. Starting now. Caleb looked directly at Clara. Mrs. Whitmore saved us yesterday. I want that acknowledged. Without her, we'd have lost everything. Here, someone said. Clara felt her face flush. I just did what needed doing. That's exactly what leadership is, Caleb said. Doing what needs doing when everyone else is lost. After breakfast, Clara watched through the window as the men began the work of clearing the burn site. Caleb was with them, hauling charred timber, organizing salvage, moving like a man trying to outrun ghosts through sheer physical labor. She understood that impulse. She'd done the same thing after Thomas died, worked until her body gave out, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant hurting. But you couldn't outrun grief forever. Eventually, you had to turn and face it. Clara spent the day on her own work, cooking, cleaning, baking bread for dinner. But her mind kept returning to the barn, to Caleb frozen by the flames, to the crack that had finally appeared in his armor. Something was changing here, something bigger than just good meals and clean kitchens. The ranch was waking up after 3 years of sleep, and Clara was at the center of it. The question was, what came next? She didn't have an answer, so she did what she always did, kept working, kept cooking, kept feeding the people who needed feeding, and hoped that would be enough. The work of clearing the barn took 3 days. Clara watched the men haul away charred beams and twisted metal, sorting through the wreckage for anything salvageable. Caleb worked alongside them, shirt soaked through with sweat, refusing to stop even when the others took breaks. He was punishing himself. Clara recognized the pattern because she'd done it herself, worked until the body screamed, until there was no room left for thought or feeling. But exhaustion wasn't the same as healing, and she wondered if he knew that. On the third evening, she found him sitting on the porch steps after dinner, staring at the empty space where the barn had stood. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and red. "You'll make yourself sick," Clara said, sitting down beside him without asking permission. "I'm fine." "You're not. You barely ate. You've been working like a man possessed." Caleb didn't look at her. "Barn won't rebuild itself." "Barn can wait. You can't work if you collapse." "I said I'm fine." His voice had an edge now. Clara let the silence stretch. A hawk circled overhead, hunting. The mountains were dark shapes against the dying light. "My husband used to do that," she said finally. "Work himself to exhaustion when something bothered him. Thought if he stayed busy enough, he wouldn't have to feel it. And? And it never worked. The feelings were always waiting when he stopped." Caleb's jaw tightened. "What do you want me to say, Clara? That I'm struggling? That seeing that fire brought everything back? I know that already. Working through it is all I can do. Working through it and working to avoid it aren't the same thing." He finally looked at her and his eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical labor. "You don't know what it was like." "You're right, I don't. But I know what it's like to lose someone. To blame yourself for things you couldn't control." She looked down at her hands, scarred and calloused from years of work. "I know what it's like to think if you'd just been faster, smarter, better. They'd still be here. Were you? Faster, I mean. When your husband died?" "No, he had a fever that wouldn't break. Doctor said there was nothing to be done. But for months after, I kept thinking, if I'd called the doctor sooner, if I'd noticed the symptoms earlier, if I'd—" She stopped. "It doesn't matter. The IFs don't change anything." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Sarah wanted children. We'd been trying for 2 years. She was so happy when we found out she was finally pregnant." His voice was flat, emotionless. "She lost it 3 months in. After that, she threw herself into running the ranch, the kitchen, the men, organizing everything. I think she needed something to mother." Clara waited. She could feel the weight of what he was about to say. "The day of the fire, she was upset. We'd argued that morning about, hell, I don't even remember what. Something stupid. She went to the barn, and I went to fix fence on the north pasture. When I came back, the barn was burning. She'd gone inside to save the horses when the fire started, and—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "They said she probably died from the smoke before the flames reached her. That's supposed to make it better somehow. Does it?" "No." He rubbed his face. "I keep thinking if I hadn't argued with her, if I'd been here instead of out fixing fence, if I'd checked the lanterns that morning—" If, Clara said gently. "You'll drive yourself mad with ifs, Caleb. I know. I did it for months." "How did you stop?" "I didn't. Not really. I just learned to live with them. The ifs are always there, but eventually they get quieter." She looked at him. "And eventually, you start building new things instead of just mourning the old ones." He met her eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Two people who'd lost everything and were trying to figure out how to keep going. "You're stronger than I am," he said. "I'm not. I just had no choice but to keep moving. You at least had this place, these men. I had nothing." She stood, her knees protesting. "Get some rest, Caleb. The barn can wait another day." She left him there and went inside, but she could feel his eyes following her. The next morning, Caleb didn't appear at breakfast. Sam went to check on him and came back shaking his head. "Says he's sick, wants to be left alone." Clara looked at the untouched plate she'd set at the head of the table. "He's not sick. He's hiding." "Boss doesn't hide. Everyone hides sometimes." Clara picked up the plate. "I'll take this to him." He said, "I know what he said." She found him in his room, a spare space with a bed, a chair, and little else. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "I brought food," Clara said from the doorway. "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." She set the plate on the chair. You want to talk about last night? There's nothing to talk about. Clara sat down on the floor, back against the wall. Caleb looked up, surprised. What are you doing? Sitting. My feet hurt. I meant, why are you here? Because you're here. And because hiding in your room isn't going to change anything. I'm not hiding. Then what do you call it? Caleb's expression shifted. Anger first, then something like defeat. I call it not knowing what the hell I'm doing anymore. I thought I had it figured out. Work hard, keep the ranch running, don't think too much. It worked for 3 years, then you showed up and what? And everything started changing. The men are different. The place feels different. I feel different. He looked at her, and his eyes were raw. I don't know if I can do this. Do what? Move forward? Let go. Whatever it is you're supposed to do after... He gestured vaguely. I loved her, Clara. I loved her, and I got her killed. And I don't know how to stop carrying that. Clara's throat tightened. She understood that weight, had carried her own version of it. You didn't get her killed. A fire did. An accident. Bad luck. Take your pick. But not you. I was supposed to protect her. You're not a wizard, Caleb. You can't prevent every bad thing. Nobody can. She leaned her head back against the wall. You want to know what I think? I think Sarah would be furious if she could see you now. Furious that you've spent 3 years punishing yourself, letting this place die, refusing to live. Is that what she would have wanted? No, he admitted quietly. Then stop doing it. Not for her. For you. Because you deserve to be more than just the man whose wife died. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up the plate and started eating. Clara stayed on the floor, and they sat in silence until he finished. Thank you, he said finally. For what? For not letting me wallow. Someone has to keep you honest. He almost smiled. You're good at that. It's a gift. Clara stood, her knees cracking. Now get dressed and come help with the barn planning. The men need to see you leading. I don't know if I can... You can. You just have to choose to. After she left, Clara leaned against the hallway wall and took a shaky breath. That conversation had cost her more than she'd let on. Talking about Thomas, about loss, about the ifs that haunted her, it had opened old wounds she'd worked hard to close. But if it helped Caleb, it was worth it. The days that followed brought a shift in the ranch's energy. Caleb emerged from his room quieter but steadier. He started making plans for the new barn, not a copy of the old one, but something different. Stronger foundation, better ventilation, stone base to prevent fire spread. We'll build it right this time, he told the men. No shortcuts, no compromises. They started work the following week. The sound of hammering and sawing filled the valley. Clara watched from the kitchen window as the barn slowly took shape. First the foundation, then the frame, then the walls. It rose piece by piece, a phoenix of wood and stone and sweat. Caleb worked alongside the men, but differently now. He didn't drive himself to exhaustion. He took breaks, accepted help, even laughed occasionally at something Red said. The change wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and he started talking to Clara. Not about anything deep, just small conversations while she cooked or served meals. He asked about her life before, about Thomas, about how she'd ended up walking west with nothing but a wooden spoon. She told him pieces of it, careful not to overwhelm with too much at once. She told him about losing the house, the endless rejections, the mining camp. She told him about her mother's spoon and why she'd never let it go. It's all I have left of her, Clara explained one evening. They were sitting on the porch again, watching the barn take shape in the fading light. She died when I was 20, gave me that spoon on my wedding day, said as long as I could cook, I'd never be helpless. She was right. Mostly, there were days I felt pretty helpless anyway. Clara ran her thumb over the worn wood. But the spoon reminded me that I had something to offer, even when nobody wanted it. I wanted it, Caleb said quietly. From that first breakfast, I knew you were different. Different how? You cooked like you meant it, like it mattered. Most people just go through the motions, but you put yourself into it. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. That's the only way I know how to do it. I know. That's why you're still here. They sat in comfortable silence as stars began appearing overhead. The night was warm, crickets singing in the grass. Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not happiness exactly, but something steadier, something that might last. Clara, Caleb said, and his voice was different, uncertain. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever think about starting over? Not running from something, but running towards something?" "What do you mean?" He shifted, uncomfortable. "I mean, do you think people like us, people who've lost everything, do we get second chances?" Clara looked at him, at his profile silhouetted against the darkening sky. "I think we make our own second chances. Nobody hands them to us. We have to build them, same as that barn. And if we mess up, if we build it wrong, then we tear it down and build again. There's no rule that says we only get one try." Caleb nodded slowly, processing this. "I'm glad you're here, Clara. I don't think I've said that clearly enough. But I am. Glad, I'm glad I'm here too." Something hung in the air between them, something unspoken but present. Clara felt it like electricity before a storm. But neither of them reached for it, not yet. Some things needed time. The barn was finished by late August. The men gathered around it, admiring their work. It was bigger than the old barn, stronger, with stone walls 3 feet high and a metal roof that wouldn't burn. Caleb ran his hand along the doorframe, and Clara saw his expression shift. Not grief this time, but something like acceptance. "It's good," he said to the men. "You all did good work." "We should celebrate," Red suggested. "Have a party or something." Tom nodded. "Been too long since this place had any joy in it." Caleb looked uncertain. Claire caught his eye and nodded slightly. He took a breath. "All right, Saturday night. We'll have a proper dinner. Mrs. Whitmore, can you—" "I can," Claire interrupted. "Leave it to me." Saturday came with clear skies and a cool breeze that promised fall was coming. Claire spent the entire day preparing. She roasted 2 hens, made potatoes 3 ways, baked bread and rolls, prepared vegetables from the garden Sam had been tending. For dessert, she made 3 pies, apple, cherry, and pecan, using preserved fruit and nuts they'd been saving. The dining room table had never looked so full. The men came in at 6, cleaned up and wearing their best shirts. Someone had strung lanterns across the porch. Red had picked wildflowers again, filling the table with color. The mood was light, almost festive. Caleb came in last, and Clara's breath caught. He'd trimmed his beard, put on a clean shirt, and there was something different in his eyes, something that looked almost like hope. He raised his glass of water. "Before we eat, I want to say something. This ranch has been through hell. We've lost people, lost buildings, lost our way for a while. But we're still here, and that's because of every man at this table, and because of the woman in the kitchen who refused to let us give up." The men murmured agreement. "So here's to Clara Whitmore, to the barn we built, to second chances." He looked directly at Clara. "And to whatever comes next." "To whatever comes next," the men echoed. They ate, and the dining room filled with laughter and stories. Miguel told a joke in Spanish that made everyone laugh, even though half of them didn't understand it. Tom sang a song from his daughter, voice cracking with emotion. Red challenged Sam to an arm wrestling match and lost spectacularly. Clara watched it all from the kitchen doorway, feeling something enormous swell in her chest. This was what she'd been building toward without knowing it. Not just full bellies, but full hearts. Not just survival, but life. Caleb found her there as the evening wound down. The men were still in the dining room, but quieter now, tired from food and fellowship. "You should be out there," he said. "This is as much your celebration as anyone's." "I'm happy here. Are you?" He stepped closer. "Happy, here at the ranch." Clara met his eyes. "Yes, more than I've been in years." "Good, because He stopped, started again. "I don't want you to leave, Clara. Ever. I know that's not fair to say. I know you might want to move on eventually, find something better. But I need you to know that you have a place here. Always. For as long as you want it." "I'm not going anywhere," Clara said softly. "Promise?" "Promise." Caleb smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. "Then I guess we're stuck with each other." "I guess we are." He reached out, hesitated, then took her hand. His palm was calloused, warm. Clara's heart hammered, but she didn't pull away. "I'm not good at this," Caleb said. "At letting people in, at being anything other than angry or guilty. But you make me want to try. You make me think maybe I deserve to try. You do deserve it. So do you. His thumb traced her knuckles. You deserve more than just cooking for rough men on a mountain. I deserve exactly what I have, Clara interrupted. A place that needs me. Work that matters. People who... She stopped, afraid to finish the thought. People who care about you, Caleb finished. People who see you, who value you. He paused. At least one person who's starting to feel things he swore he'd never feel again. Clara's breath caught. Caleb, I know it's too soon. I know I've got no right to feel this way when I'm still carrying all this. He gestured vaguely. But I can't help it. You've changed everything, Clara. You've changed me. You changed yourself. I just cooked. No, you did so much more than that. His hand tightened on hers. You gave me a reason to keep going, to build instead of just survive, to hope that maybe life isn't over just because... His voice cracked. Clara stepped closer, closing the distance between them. It's not over, Caleb, for either of us. We're both still here, still standing. That counts for something. It counts for everything. They stood there, hands joined, the noise of the celebration fading to background. Clara felt the moment stretch and crystallize, becoming something she'd remember forever. The weight of his hand in hers, the smell of pine and wood smoke, the look in his eyes that said things neither of them was quite ready to speak aloud. I can't promise I'll be easy, Caleb said. I'm broken in ways I'm still figuring out. I'm broken too. We all are, in our own ways. So what do we do about it? Clara smiled. We keep building, same as the barn, one piece at a time. He nodded slowly. One piece at a time. I can do that. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere and you're stuck with me. Best news I've heard in 3 years. They stayed like that a moment longer. Then Caleb gently released her hand. I should get back to the men. But Clara, thank you. For tonight. For everything. You're welcome. He walked back into the dining room and Clara leaned against the doorframe, her hand still warm from his touch. Something had shifted between them tonight. Something irrevocable. She wasn't sure where it would lead, wasn't sure if either of them was ready for what it might become. But for the first time since Thomas died, Clara felt like she was moving towards something instead of just away from everything she'd lost. The celebration wound down around midnight. The men drifted off to the bunkhouse, calling good nights, thanking Clara again for the meal. She cleaned up the kitchen, her body tired but her mind racing. When she finally made it to her room, she sat on the cot and looked at her mother's wooden spoon. We made it, Mama, she whispered. We found somewhere we belong. Outside her window, the new barn stood silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Inside it, no ghosts lived, only potential, only the future waiting to be built. Clara lay down and closed her eyes, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she fell asleep smiling. The next morning started like any other. Clara woke before dawn, built the fire, started coffee. But something was different. The air felt charged, full of possibility. Caleb came into the kitchen earlier than usual, still buttoning his shirt. Couldn't sleep, he said. Me neither. They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Caleb said, About last night. We don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. I want to. I want to make sure I didn't overstep, that I didn't make you uncomfortable. You didn't. Clara poured coffee, handed him a cup. You were honest. I appreciate that. Good. Because I meant it. All of it. He sipped the coffee, watching her over the rim. I know we've both got our own ghosts to wrestle, but maybe we can wrestle them together. Maybe we can. So where does that leave us? Clara thought about it. Right here. Doing what we've been doing. Building. One piece at a time, like you said. That's enough for you? No promises? No guarantees? That's exactly enough. Promises and guarantees didn't save me before. Work did. Purpose did. Being needed did. She met his eyes. Being seen did. I see you, Clara. I promise you that. I know. And I see you too. All of you, including the broken parts. Caleb set down his cup and crossed to her. He cupped her face in his hands, rough palms gentle against her skin. I'm going to kiss you now, if that's all right. Clara's heart hammered. It's all right. He kissed her softly, carefully, like she was something precious that might break. Clara leaned into him, into this unexpected second chance she'd never dared to hope for. When they broke apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "Well," he said breathlessly. "Well," Clara agreed. "The men are going to have opinions about this. Let them. We're both adults." "You're not worried about your reputation?" Clara laughed. "My reputation? Caleb, I'm a widow living on a ranch with 15 men. Anyone worried about propriety would have left months ago." He smiled. "Point taken." They heard boots on the porch, the men arriving for breakfast. Caleb stepped back, straightened his shirt, and gave Clara one more long look before heading to the dining room. Clara turned back to the stove, her face flushed, her hands shaking slightly. Everything was changing. Everything had already changed, and for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't afraid of it. The men noticed within a week, though they had the decency not to say anything directly. Clara caught their glances when Caleb lingered in the kitchen after meals, saw their knowing smiles when he touched her shoulder in passing. But they didn't pry, and Clara was grateful for that. What she and Caleb had wasn't simple enough to explain. They weren't courting in any traditional sense. There were no Sunday walks or formal declarations. Instead, they existed in the spaces between work. A conversation on the porch after dark, his hand finding hers when they stood watching the sunset. Small moments that added up to something larger. "You're glowing," Tom said one morning, helping Clara carry water from the pump. "I'm sweating. It's hot." "That's not what I meant." He grinned. "Boss is different too, lighter somehow. You're good for him. Maybe he's good for me. Maybe you're good for each other." Tom set down his bucket. "Sarah would have liked you, I think. She had that same no-nonsense way about her." Clara felt a pang at the mention of Caleb's wife. You think he's ready for this? Ready or not, it's happening." Tom's expression turned serious. "Look, Mrs. Whitmore, Clara, the boss spent 3 years locked in his own head. You brought him back. That's not something to question. That's something to be grateful for." But gratitude didn't quiet Clara's doubts. Late at night, lying in her narrow cot, she wondered if she was enough. If a widow who'd walked west with nothing could really be what a man like Caleb needed. If she was taking advantage of his grief, filling a space that belonged to someone else. She didn't voice these fears to him. Instead, she cooked. She worked. She did what she'd always done, proved her worth through action rather than words. September brought this first real cold. Frost appeared on the grass in the mornings, and the mountains turned gold and red. The men worked from dawn to dusk, preparing for winter, cutting firewood, reinforcing buildings, moving cattle to lower pastures. Clara preserved everything she could find: vegetables from the garden, wild berries, meat that needed smoking or salting. The ranch hummed with purposeful energy. This wasn't the desperate survival of previous years, Sam told her. This was preparation born from confidence that they'd make it through. "Place feels alive again," he said, standing in the kitchen doorway one afternoon. "Even the horses seem happier." "Horses don't care about happiness." "Sure they do. Animals know when a place is dying or living. They know." Sam looked at her seriously. "You did this, Clara. You and the boss together, but it started with you." Clara didn't know how to respond to that, so she just kept kneading dough. That evening, Caleb found her in the pantry taking inventory. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her count flour sacks. "We need to talk," he said. Clara's stomach dropped. Those words never preceded good news. "About what? About us? About what we're doing?" She set down her pencil. "All right." Caleb stepped into the small space, suddenly making it smaller. "I'm not good at this. At relationships, at letting myself want things. After Sarah died, I told myself I was done, that I'd had my chance at happiness and lost it, and that was that. But then you showed up with your wooden spoon and your stubborn refusal to be dismissed, and..." He stopped, frustrated with himself. "I'm trying to say I care about you, Clara. More than I should, probably. More than I know what to do with. Why is that a problem? Because I don't want to hurt you. And I don't want you to think that you're filling some empty space Sarah left. You're not. You're completely your own person, and what I feel for you is different from what I felt for her. But I'm scared I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to fail you the way I failed her." Clara looked at him. This hard man with his winter sky eyes and his careful way of holding himself, like one wrong move might shatter everything. She understood his fear because she carried a similar one. "You didn't fail Sarah," she said quietly. "You couldn't save her from an accident. That's not the same as failing." "Feels the same. I know, but it's not." Clara stepped closer. "And I'm scared too, Caleb. Scared that I'm not enough. That eventually you'll realize I'm just a fat widow who can cook, and that's not sufficient for whatever this is." "You think that's all you are?" Caleb's voice was sharp. "Clara, you took command during a fire when I froze. You kept this place running when I was drowning in my own head. You made a group of broken men feel like a family again. That's not just anything. Then why am I still afraid?" "Because we're both human, and humans are afraid of losing things that matter." He took her hands. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe being afraid means it's worth the risk." Clara looked down at their joined hands, his scarred and weathered, hers stained and calloused. Two people who'd worked themselves to the bone just to survive, now standing in a pantry talking about fear and risk and the terrifying possibility of hope. "So what do we do?" she asked. "We keep going. One day at a time, one piece at a time, like you said." Caleb squeezed her hands. "And we stop apologizing for wanting something good. Can it be that simple?" "It can if we let it." Clara wanted to believe him, but that night, alone in her room, the doubts crept back in. She was 42 years old, worn down by life and labor. What did she have to offer beyond competent cooking? What future could she build with a man still grieving his dead wife? The answer came from an unexpected source. Red knocked on her door the next morning before breakfast. "Mrs. Whitmore, can I talk to you?" "Of course." He shuffled his feet, nervous. "It's just, I wanted to say thank you for everything you've done here. For me especially." "I haven't done anything special for you, Red." "You have, though. You treat me like I matter, like I'm not just some kid running from something." His voice cracked slightly. "My ma died when I was 12. After that, it was just me and my pa, and he wasn't kind. I left soon as I could, been drifting ever since. But here, with you cooking and making this place feel like somewhere safe, it's the first time I've felt at home in 8 years." Clara's throat tightened. "Red, I know the boss cares about you. Everyone knows. And I just wanted to say, you deserve it. You deserve all of it. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." After he left, Clara sat on her cot and cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of being seen, being valued, being told she was enough. She'd spent so long being dismissed and discarded that she'd started believing that was all she deserved. But Red was right. She did deserve more. They all did. All the broken people gathered on this mountain, trying to build something from their accumulated wreckage. The next few weeks brought a deepening between Clara and Caleb. Nothing dramatic, just a steady progression of trust. He told her about Sarah in more detail, not to compare, but to let Clara understand the full scope of what he'd lost. Clara told him about Thomas, about the loneliness of their marriage, about how she'd loved him but had never felt truly seen by him. "He was a good man," she said one evening. They were in the kitchen after dinner, Caleb drying dishes while Clara washed. "But he never quite knew what to do with me. I think I scared him a little." "Scared him how?" "I was too much. Too opinionated, too large, too present, I guess. He wanted a wife who'd fade into the background, and I never could manage it." She scrubbed a pot harder than necessary. "After he died, part of me felt guilty for feeling relieved. Not that he was dead, but that I didn't have to keep trying to be smaller than I was." Caleb set down the dish he was drying. "Clara, look at me." She did. "You're not too much. You're exactly enough. And anyone who made you feel otherwise was a fool." "Thomas wasn't a fool. He was a fool if he didn't see what he had." Caleb's voice was firm. "I see you, Clara, every part of you, and I don't want you smaller or quieter or different in any way." Something broke open in Clara's chest, a knot she'd been carrying for years suddenly loosening. "I don't know what I did to deserve you. You didn't have to do anything. You just had to be you." That night, Clara slept deeply and dreamlessly for the first time in months. October arrived with snow flurries and biting wind. The men worked to finish the last preparations before winter locked them in. Clara spent long hours in the kitchen, cooking and preserving, making sure they had enough to last until spring. Caleb started spending more time in the house, working on ranch accounts at the dining table, close enough that they could talk while Clara cooked. The domesticity of it felt strange and wonderful, like playing at being a married couple, except it wasn't play. "We should talk about spring," Caleb said one afternoon. "What about it?" "About what happens when the snow melts and you're not trapped here anymore." Clara turned from the stove. "Why would I leave?" "Because you could, because there are better opportunities in town. Better what, Caleb? Better kitchens? Better pay? Better people?" She shook her head. "I don't want better. I want this." "You say that now, but I say it now, and I'll say it in spring, and I'll keep saying it until you believe me." She crossed to him, flour-dusted and exasperated. "I'm not leaving, not unless you ask me to." "I'll never ask you to." "Then we're settled." "Clara." He stood, caught her hand. "I'm trying to give you an out, in case you realize you've made a mistake. The only mistake would be leaving when I've finally found somewhere I belong." She looked at him steadily. "I love you, Caleb. I've been trying not to, trying to convince myself it's too soon or too complicated, but I do. And if that scares you, we can slow down, but I'm not leaving." Caleb stared at her like she'd just announced she could fly. Then he pulled her close and kissed her hard, desperately, like a drowning man breaking the surface. "I love you too," he said against her mouth. "I've been terrified to say it, but I do. I love you." "Then stop trying to push me away." "I will, I am. He rested his forehead against hers. "I just needed to know you were sure." "I'm sure." They stood there holding each other while the stew simmered on the stove and snow began falling outside. The house was warm, the moment perfect, and Clara felt something she'd never expected to feel again: complete. The men figured it out officially when Caleb moved Clara's things into the main bedroom, not sneakily or with any attempt at discretion. He just carried her few belongings upstairs one Sunday morning while she was making breakfast. Tom grinned. Miguel whistled. Sam clapped Caleb on the back. "About time, boss," Red said. Caleb looked embarrassed but determined. "Anyone got a problem with this? Speak now." Nobody spoke. They just kept grinning. That night, Clara stood in the bedroom, their bedroom, looking at her wooden spoon now sitting on the dresser next to Caleb's pocket watch. 2 lives, 2 histories, coming together in one space. "You all right?" Caleb asked from the doorway. "Yes, just thinking." About how far I've come. How I almost gave up a dozen times on the way here." She touched the spoon lightly. "My mother told me this would keep me from being helpless. I think she meant more than just cooking." "What did she mean?" "That having something to offer the world, anything, even just the ability to feed people, means you're never really without value. You always have something to contribute." Caleb crossed to her. "You contribute so much more than food, Clara. You know that, right? I'm learning to believe it." "Good. Because it's true." That winter was hard but not brutal. The snow came heavy and stayed late, locking them in the valley for weeks at a time. But the ranch was prepared. The barn held enough hay for the animals. The pantry was stocked. The men had firewood and warm beds and meals that reminded them why they stayed. Clara and Caleb settled into their new arrangement with surprisingly little friction. They still argued occasionally about ranch decisions, about what to have for dinner, about whether Caleb was pushing himself too hard, but the arguments never lasted. They'd both lost too much to waste time on pride. "You're stubborn," Caleb said one evening after a disagreement about hiring another hand in spring. "So are you." "True, but I'm right about this." "You're not." Clara crossed her arms. "We don't need another hand. We need better organization of the hands we have." "And how do you figure that?" "Because I watch them work. Miguel and Tom are being wasted on tasks any greenhorn could do. Red has skills you're not using. If I just listened to my cook about ranch management," Caleb's tone was teasing now. "If you just listen to someone who's been observing while you've been doing." He considered this. "You might have a point." "I usually do." Caleb laughed and pulled her close. "How did I get so lucky?" "You didn't. You chose well, and I chose well, and we're making it work." "Fair enough." The winter days blurred together in a rhythm of work and warmth. Clara woke before dawn each morning, slipping out of bed carefully so as not to wake Caleb. She'd build up the fire in the kitchen stove, start the coffee, begin the breakfast preparations. By the time the men came in, stamping snow from their boots, the kitchen would be warm and fragrant with cooking. But the evenings were hers and Caleb's. After the dinner dishes were cleared and the men had retreated to the bunkhouse, they'd sit together by the fire. Sometimes they talked about the ranch, about their pasts, about hopes for the future. Sometimes they just sat in companionable silence, reading or working on small tasks. One particularly brutal night in January, when the wind howled and the temperature dropped so low the windows frosted solid, Caleb looked up from the accounts he was reviewing. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Regret what?" "This life. The isolation. Being stuck on a mountain with rough men and limited company." Clara set down her mending. "Do you regret it?" I asked first. "No," she said simply. "I don't regret it. This is the first place I've ever felt like I truly belonged. Why would I regret that?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I worry that I've trapped you, that you settled for this because you didn't think you had other options." "Caleb Ward, look at me." Clara waited until he met her eyes. "I walked away from a job offer that paid more money. I chose this place, this life, you. Not because I had no options, but because this is what I wanted. Stop trying to talk me out of my own decisions." "I'm not trying to—" "You are. You're looking for reasons why I shouldn't want this, why I shouldn't want you, and I need you to stop because it's insulting." Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "I'm a grown woman who survived things that would have broken weaker people. I know my own mind. Trust that." Caleb stared at her, then slowly nodded. "You're right. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, just believe me when I tell you I'm exactly where I want to be." He crossed to her, knelt beside her chair, and took her work-roughened hands in his. "I do believe you. It's just, I'm still learning how to accept good things without waiting for them to be taken away." "I know, so am I." Clara cupped his face. "We'll learn together." On Christmas, Clara cooked a feast that would have fed twice their number: ham and turkey, potatoes and gravy, vegetables preserved from the summer garden, fresh bread, and 3 kinds of pie. The men came in wide-eyed, and even Caleb looked stunned. "Clara, this is—" "Celebration," she finished. "We made it through the worst. We're still here. That's worth celebrating." They ate until they couldn't move, and then Red pulled out a harmonica and played carols while everyone sang. Caleb's voice was surprisingly good, deep and steady. Clara leaned against him, full and happy, and exactly where she wanted to be. Tom stood up, a bit unsteady from the meal. "I'd like to say something, if that's all right." "Go ahead," Caleb said. "When I came to this ranch 4 years ago, it was just a job, a place to work, earn money, send it back to my daughter. But this past year it's become more than that. It's become a home, and that's because of Mrs. Whitmore, Clara." He raised his glass of cider. "She didn't just feed us. She reminded us what it feels like to be cared for, to matter to someone. So thank you, Clara, for everything." "Hear, hear," the men chorused. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You all matter, every single one of you. Don't ever forget that." The evening wound down slowly, reluctantly. The men drifted back to the bunkhouse one by one, calling their thanks and good nights. Finally, only Clara and Caleb remained, sitting by the dying fire. "That was perfect," Caleb said quietly. "The meal, the evening, all of it." "It was, wasn't it?" Clara smiled. "First Christmas in years that didn't feel like just going through the motions. Sarah used to love Christmas. She'd decorate the whole house, bake for weeks." His voice was reflective, not sad. "I thought I'd never enjoy it again, but tonight was good. Different, but good." "Different can be good." "Yes, it can." He pulled her closer. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me back my life." "You did that yourself, Caleb. I just cooked dinner." "You did so much more than that, and you know it." Maybe she did. Maybe they'd saved each other in ways neither of them had articulated yet. 2 broken people, finding wholeness not through fixing what was damaged, but through building something entirely new. January brought the hardest cold. They woke to frost on the inside of the windows, to water frozen in the buckets. Clara cooked hearty breakfasts, Oatmeal with honey, bacon, eggs, bread toasted on the stovetop. The men needed fuel to work, and she made sure they had it. But she also made sure they had comfort. Cookies appeared regularly. Hot coffee was always ready. The kitchen stayed warm, and the dining room became a gathering place where the men lingered, reluctant to face the cold outside. "You've made this place feel human again," Sam told her one afternoon, "like somewhere worth fighting for." "It always was. You all just forgot for a while." "Maybe, but you reminded us." One particularly cold night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the wind and thinking about all the nights she'd spent cold and alone on her walk west. How different her life was now. How impossible this happiness would have seemed back then. She slipped out of bed and went downstairs to the kitchen. The fire in the stove had died down to embers, and she built it back up, then put water on for tea. While she waited, she took out her mother's wooden spoon and held it, feeling the worn smoothness under her fingers. "I wish you could see this, Mama," she whispered. "Wish you could see what I built from nothing." "Talking to yourself?" Clara turned to find Caleb in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. "Couldn't sleep?" "Bed was cold without you." He came to stand beside her. "You all right?" "Yes. Just thinking about how far I've come, how many times I almost gave up." "What stopped you?" Clara looked at the spoon in her hand. "Stubbornness, mostly, and this. My mother gave it to me, told me as long as I could cook, I'd have value. I held on to that when everything else was gone." Caleb took the spoon from her, examined it. "It's seen a lot of use. 3 generations of women. My grandmother, my mother, now me." She took it back gently. "It's all I have left of them." "Not all. You have their strength, their determination. That's worth more than any object." "Maybe, but the object helps me remember." The water boiled, and Clara made tea for both of them. They sat at the kitchen table, the only sound the pop and crackle of the fire. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if Thomas hadn't died?" Caleb asked. "Sometimes, but I don't think it would have been particularly good. We weren't happy, not really. We were just existing together." Clara sipped her tea. "What about you? Do you wonder what life would be like if Sarah had lived?" "Used to. Spent the first 2 years doing nothing but wondering. But lately," he paused, "lately I've been thinking that maybe this is the life I was supposed to have. Not the one I expected, but the right one anyway." "Because of the ranch?" "Because of you." He reached across the table, took her hand. "I loved Sarah. I'll always love her. But what I feel for you is different. Not better or worse, just different. And I'm starting to accept that it's all right to have both, to honor what was and embrace what is." Clara squeezed his hand. "She'd want you to be happy, Caleb. I never knew her, but I know that much." "How can you know?" "Because anyone who loved you would want that. It's what love does. It wants the best for the other person, even after death." They finished their tea in comfortable silence, then went back to bed. This time, sleep came easily for both of them. In February, Caleb proposed. Not dramatically, he just asked one night in bed, both of them tired and half asleep. "Marry me," he said. Clara opened her eyes. "What?" "Marry me. Make this official. I know we're already living as if we're married, but I want the words, the commitment. I want everyone to know you're mine and I'm yours." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Clara thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Yes." "Yes?" "Yes, I'll marry you." Caleb kissed her, and they both started laughing for no particular reason except that they were happy and it felt good to laugh. The next morning at breakfast, Caleb made the announcement. The men erupted in cheers and congratulations. Red actually whooped. Tom cried openly. Miguel clapped Caleb on the back so hard he nearly knocked him over. "About damn time," Sam said, grinning. "When's the wedding?" Red asked. "Soon as the circuit preacher can make it up here," Caleb said. "Probably March, when the snow starts melting." "We should throw a party," Tom suggested. "A real celebration." "We'll see," Clara said, but she was smiling. The weeks between the proposal and the wedding passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. Clara found herself thinking about things she hadn't considered in years. What she'd wear, what they'd serve, who would stand up with them. Small details that suddenly seemed important. The women from the nearest ranch, The Hendersons, about 15 miles south, rode up one afternoon when they heard the news. Martha Henderson was a sturdy woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense manner and kind eyes. "Heard you're getting married," she said, accepting a cup of coffee from Clara. "News travels fast." "Always does out here. Not much else to talk about." Martha looked around the kitchen approvingly. "You've done well with this place. Heard it was in rough shape when you arrived. It needed work." "Most things do. Question is whether you're willing to put in the effort." Martha studied Clara. "You are, clearly. Caleb's a good man, but he was lost for a long time. You brought him back." "We brought each other back, I think." "Even better." Martha set down her cup. "I brought you something. Call it an early wedding present." She handed Clara a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a dress, simple but beautiful, made of dark blue fabric with careful stitching. "It was my wedding dress," Martha said. 40 years ago now. Figured you might need something better than work clothes for the ceremony." Clara's throat tightened. "I can't take this." "Of course you can. It's just sitting in my trunk collecting dust. Might as well get some use." Martha's voice was gruff, but her eyes were warm. "Besides, we women got to stick together out here, not many of us, and the ones there are need to look out for each other." "Thank you," Clara managed. "Don't mention it. Just invite me to the wedding." "Of course." Martha and her daughter stayed for lunch, and Clara found herself grateful for the female company. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed talking to other women, about everyday things, about life, about the particular challenges of surviving in this harsh place. "How do you do it?" she asked Martha as they washed dishes together. "Stay out here, year after year, with the isolation and the hard winters and everything else? You find your reasons," Martha said simply. "My husband, my children, my garden, the view from my kitchen window, the satisfaction of building something that lasts." She looked at Clara. "Same reasons as you, I'd wager?" "I suppose so. And once you've got roots down, it's hard to leave. This land gets in your blood." Martha dried a plate. "You'll see. Give it another year or two, and you won't be able to imagine living anywhere else." Clara thought about that after Martha and her daughter left. Was she already rooted here? She thought she might be. The mountains, the valley, the endless sky, they'd become part of her somehow. This place had given her something she'd been missing, and she'd given it something in return. A fair trade. They married in March, as soon as the snow melted enough for the circuit preacher to make it up the mountain. It was a simple ceremony on the porch, with the men as witnesses. Clara wore Martha's dress. It fit perfectly after a few minor alterations. Caleb wore his Sunday suit, looking nervous and happy in equal measure. The preacher was an older man with wire-rimmed glasses and a kind smile. He'd married couples in barns, by rivers, in mining camps, and once on horseback during a cattle drive. A ranch porch was practically luxurious by comparison. "Dearly beloved," he began, but Caleb interrupted. "I'm sorry, Reverend, but I need to say something first." The preacher blinked. "That's irregular." "I don't care." Caleb turned to Clara, took both her hands. "I need you to know what you're getting. I'm not an easy man. I'm stubborn and damaged, and I carry ghosts I'll probably never fully let go of. I'll work too hard and forget to eat, and sometimes I'll shut down when I should open up. But I will love you with everything I have. I will protect you and honor you, and wake up every day grateful that you chose this life with me. That's my vow, Clara. Everything I am, everything I have, it is yours." Clara's eyes were wet. "Well, I guess it's my turn." She cleared her throat. "I'm not easy either. I'm opinionated and stubborn, and I won't ever be the kind of wife who just agrees with everything you say. I'll challenge you and argue with you and probably drive you crazy sometimes, but I will stand beside you through whatever comes. I will feed you and care for you and love you, even on the days when neither of us particularly likes each other. That's my vow. We'll build this life together, piece by piece, and it'll be ours." The preacher cleared his throat. "Well then, that was quite lovely. Do you, Caleb Ward, take this woman—" "I do," Caleb interrupted again. "Absolutely I do." "Sir, I haven't finished." "Don't care. The answer's yes." Everyone laughed, and the preacher shook his head but continued with the ceremony. When he finally got to the part about kissing the bride, Caleb pulled Clara close and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The men cheered and threw their hats in the air. Tom produced a fiddle from somewhere and started playing. Martha Henderson had sent up a cake, small but beautifully decorated. Someone had made punch. The celebration spilled from the porch into the yard, and the afternoon passed in a blur of music and laughter and joy. As evening approached and the guests began to leave, Clara stood with Caleb on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Mrs. Ward," he said, testing the name. "Sounds strange." "Suits you, though." Clara looked at the ring on her finger, a simple gold band Caleb had bought in town. Nothing fancy, but solid and real and hers. "I'm glad we did this," she said. "The official ceremony, the celebration, all of it." "Me too." Caleb put his arm around her. "Feels like a new beginning. Or maybe just a continuation. We were already building this life together. Now we just have the words to match. Either way, I'm glad." He kissed her temple. "Thank you for saying yes." "Thank you for asking." They stood there as the stars began to appear, the valley settling into twilight. Tomorrow would bring work and challenges and all the mundane realities of life. But tonight, there was just this. Two people who'd found each other against all odds, choosing to build something together. That night, in their bedroom, Clara looked at her wooden spoon sitting on the dresser beside Caleb's pocket watch. Two lives, two histories, now officially joined. "I wish my mother could have been here," she said softly. "Tell me about her," Caleb said, settling against the headboard. So Clara did. She talked about her mother's hands, always moving, always working, about the kitchen they'd shared when Clara was young, the lessons passed down through bread dough and soup pots. About the day her mother had given her the spoon and what it had meant. Not just a kitchen tool, but a promise. A promise that Clara would always have something to offer, always have value, always have a way forward. "She sounds remarkable," Caleb said when Clara finished. She was. Hard as nails and soft as butter, depending on what was needed. "I hope I'm half the woman she was." "You're exactly the woman you need to be." Caleb pulled her close. "And she'd be proud of you, of everything you've built, everything you've survived." Clara hoped that was true. She thought it probably was. Spring came fully in April, turning the valley green and filling the air with the smell of growing things. The men worked with renewed energy, repairing winter damage, preparing for the year ahead. Clara planted a proper garden with help from Martha Henderson, who rode up one day with seeds and advice. "Put your tomatoes here," Martha said, pointing. "They'll get the most sun. And your beans can climb these poles, saves space and makes picking easier." They worked together in companionable silence for a while. Then Martha said, "You're settling in well. Can see it in how you move, how you talk about this place. You belong here now." "I think I do." "Good. We need more strong women out here. Too many come and can't hack it, run back to civilization first chance they get." Martha tamped down soil around a seedling. "But you've got what it takes. You and Caleb are going to build something that lasts." Clara hoped that was true too. By summer, she knew it was. The ranch was thriving in ways it hadn't in years. Word spread about the cook who could make simple food taste like heaven, about the ranch that treated its workers like family, about the boss who'd come back from grief stronger than before. Men looking for work showed up asking for jobs. Clara fed them, and if they were good workers, Caleb hired them. The ranch grew, not recklessly, but steadily. By midsummer, they had 20 hands. By fall, 25. Clara hired a helper for the kitchen, a young woman from town named Beth, who'd heard about the ranch and wanted to learn. She was 19, thin as a rail, with hopeful eyes and calloused hands that said she understood hard work. "You'll work harder than you've ever worked," Clara told her during the interview. "Longer hours, tougher conditions, but you'll eat well, sleep safe, and be treated with respect. Those things enough for you?" Beth nodded eagerly. "More than enough, ma'am. I don't have anywhere else to go. My pa died last year, and my ma remarried a man who—" She stopped. "I just need somewhere I can work and be left alone." Clara understood that need in her bones. "You'll be left alone here, and if anyone bothers you, you tell me or Mr. Ward immediately. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Beth moved into the small room Clara had first occupied, and the kitchen became a shared space. Clara taught her the way her mother had taught her, through demonstration and practice, through patience and the occasional sharp correction when something went wrong. "You're good at this," Caleb observed one evening, watching Clara show Beth how to make pie crust. At teaching? At passing things on. At making sure what you know doesn't die with you. Clara thought about that. It was true. She was teaching Beth not just how to cook, but how to survive, how to find value in work, how to build something from nothing. My mother did the same for me, she said. It's only right I do it for someone else. By fall, Beth had become indispensable. She could handle breakfast on her own, which freed Clara to focus on more complex meals. She learned the men's preferences, anticipated needs, worked with a quiet efficiency that reminded Clara of herself at that age. "Thank you," Beth said one evening as they cleaned up after dinner, "for giving me this chance." "You earned it." Still, not everyone would have taken me in, would have seen past. She gestured vaguely at herself. "Past all of it. I know what it's like to need someone to take a chance on you," Clara said quietly. "Figured I'd pay it forward." That fall, Tom finally saved enough money to visit his daughter. Clara packed him food for the journey and hugged him hard. "Come back," she said. "I will. This is home now." Tom's eyes were wet. "You made it home." He left on a Thursday and returned 3 weeks later with stories about his grandson and joy radiating from every pore. The ranch felt complete with him back, like a missing piece had returned. "How was he?" Claire asked. "Your grandson?" "Perfect. 3 years old and full of questions." Tom's face lit up. "He called me Grandpa. Just like that. Like he'd known me his whole life. My daughter, she cried when she saw me. Said she'd given up hoping I'd come. But you did, because of you. Because you gave me a place I could save money, a home I wanted to come back to." Tom gripped her hand. "You gave me my family back, Clara." Stories like that kept Clara going through the hard days. Because there were hard days, times when the work felt endless, when the men got restless and fights broke out, when winter supplies ran low and she had to stretch meals thinner than she wanted, days when she woke up exhausted and wondered if she had the strength to keep going. But then something would happen. Red would bring wildflowers. Miguel would fix something that was broken. Caleb would find her in the kitchen late at night and pull her away from her work, insisting she rest. The men would linger after dinner, talking and laughing, and Clara would see what she'd built. Not just meals, but community. Those moments made the hard days worth it. Winter came again, and this time it felt different. Not easier. Winter was never easy, but manageable. They knew what to expect, knew they'd make it through. The kitchen stayed warm, the men stayed fed, and the ranch kept running. Clara stood at the window one December evening, watching snow fall on the valley. Behind her, she could hear the men in the dining room, laughing over their meal. Caleb was with them, his voice rising above the rest as he told some story about a stubborn bull and a broken fence. 2 years ago, she'd been walking west with nothing but a wooden spoon and stubbornness. Now she had a home, a husband, a purpose that went beyond mere survival. She had people who needed her and people she needed right back. She had a life that mattered. "You all right?" Caleb appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Yes, just thinking." About? About how strange life is. How you can lose everything and think that's the end, but it's really just a turning point. The beginning of something else. Caleb kissed her temple. "Wise words, Mrs. Ward." "I have my moments." They stood there, watching the snow, and Clara felt peace settle over her like a blanket. This life wasn't perfect. There were hard days and setbacks and moments of doubt. But it was hers. She'd built it with her own hands, her own skills, her own refusal to give up. And that was worth more than any amount of comfort or convenience or ease could ever be. The winter passed slowly but steadily. Clara and Beth worked together in the kitchen, developing a rhythm that made the work easier. Caleb spent evenings teaching Clara to read the ranch accounts, explaining profit and loss and planning for the future. "You should understand this," he said, "in case something happens to me. Nothing's going to happen to you. Probably not. But you should still know." He showed her the ledgers, the carefully recorded numbers. "We're doing well, Clara. Better than we have in 5 years. Part of that's good cattle prices, but most of it's because the men are working harder. They're not just collecting wages, they're invested in this place. Because it feels like home now." "Exactly, and that's because of you." Clara didn't argue. She was starting to accept her role in the ranch's transformation, starting to believe that what she'd contributed mattered. In February, Martha Henderson came by with news. "We're organizing a women's gathering," she said. "Once a month we'll rotate houses. Just the women, to talk and share and support each other. You'll come?" "I'd like that." "Good. Next one's at the Morrison Ranch, second Sunday of March. Bring that helper of yours. Beth, right? She should meet some other women her age." The gathering became a lifeline Clara hadn't known she needed. Sitting with other ranch wives and daughters, sharing stories and recipes and frustrations, reminded her that she wasn't alone in this harsh place. These women understood what it took to survive out here, understood the particular challenges of making a life on the frontier. "My husband thinks I'm crazy for staying," one young wife said. "Says I should go back east where life is easier." "Life's not easier there," Martha said firmly. "It's just different. Out here, at least we know what we're dealing with." "And we have each other," Clara added. "That counts for something." It counted for a lot, actually. The women's gathering became a source of strength, a reminder that she was part of something larger than just her ranch, her kitchen, her immediate world. Spring came again, and with it new challenges. A late frost killed half the garden. 2 of the hands quit to try their luck in the goldfields. A cattle disease swept through the herd, requiring constant attention and care. But they weathered it, all of it. Because that's what they did. They faced problems and solved them and kept moving forward. One evening in April, after a particularly difficult day, Clara sat on the porch with her mother's wooden spoon in her lap. She was tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion, tired of solving problems, tired of being strong, tired of always being needed. Caleb found her there. He didn't say anything, just sat down beside her and took her hand. "Rough day," he said finally. "Rough week, rough month, honestly. You want to talk about it?" "Not really. I just want to sit here and not think for a while." "All right." They sat in silence as the sun set. Eventually, Clara said, "Do you ever wonder if we're doing this right? If we're making the right choices?" "Every day. But then I look at what we've built and I think, even if we're not doing it perfectly, we're doing it, and that's more than most people manage." "You think that's enough?" I think it has to be. Perfection's not possible, Clara. Not in life, not in ranching, not in marriage. All we can do is our best and hope it's enough." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just tired enough to be honest." They laughed, and some of the weight Clara had been carrying lifted. Caleb was right. Perfection wasn't the goal. Survival was. Building something that lasted was. Finding meaning in the struggle was. And they were doing all of those things. Summer brought its own challenges and rewards. The garden, despite the late frost, produced abundantly. The cattle herd recovered. New hands arrived, and Clara and Beth fed them all with the efficiency born of practice. One afternoon, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was well-dressed, clearly from town, with soft hands and a calculating expression. Caleb met him in the yard, and Clara watched from the kitchen window. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes. When the man left, Caleb looked troubled. "Who was that?" Clara asked when he came inside. "Land speculator. Wanted to buy the ranch." Clara's stomach dropped. "You didn't?" "Of course not. But he offered good money, Clara, more than the place is probably worth." "So?" "So I wanted you to know. In case you ever wanted to sell. To move somewhere easier, more civilized." Clara set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. "Caleb Ward, are we going to have this conversation every few months for the rest of our lives?" "What conversation?" "The one where you try to give me an out, where you convince yourself I'm going to leave." She crossed to him. "I'm not leaving, not for money, not for ease, not for anything. This is my home. You are my home. When are you going to believe that?" "I do believe it. You just can't quite accept that you deserve to keep it. That you deserve to be happy." Clara cupped his face. "But you do, Caleb. You deserve all of it, and so do I. So stop trying to push away the good things we've built." He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "I'm sorry. You're right. I'll stop." "Good. Because I'm tired of convincing you that I chose this life on purpose." "Deal." That conversation marked a turning point. Caleb stopped questioning whether Clara would stay and started planning for their future with the assumption that they'd build it together. They talked about expanding the house, about building a second barn, about all the things they'd do in the years to come. "We could have a family," Caleb said one night. "If you wanted. I know it might not be possible at your age, but I'm 43, Caleb. It's probably not possible. But if it was, I'd be terrified and thrilled in equal measure." Clara looked at him. "I never had children with Thomas. It never happened, and I'd made peace with that. But if it happened with you, I wouldn't be unhappy about it." "Neither would I." It didn't happen. But the conversation opened something between them, a tenderness and possibility that hadn't been there before. Fall came again, bringing the familiar work of harvest and preparation. Clara and Beth preserved everything they could get their hands on. The men worked dawn to dark, bringing in hay, moving cattle, getting ready for winter. On Clara's 44th birthday, the ranch threw her a surprise party. She came into the dining room to find it decorated with wildflowers and pine boughs. A cake on the table, all the men grinning. "What is this?" she asked. "Your birthday," Tom said. "Did you think we wouldn't notice?" "I didn't think. I haven't celebrated my birthday in years." "Well, you're celebrating it now," Caleb said, pulling her close, "because you deserve to be celebrated." They sang, badly and off-key, and Clara cried, which made her feel foolish, but she couldn't help it. These men, these rough, broken men she'd fed and cared for, were celebrating her, seeing her, telling her she mattered. "Thank you," she managed, "all of you." "Thank you," Red said, "for everything you've done for us." That night, lying in bed beside Caleb, Clara thought about all the birthdays she'd spent alone or unhappy, feeling invisible and unimportant, and now here she was, surrounded by people who cared, in a life she'd built from nothing. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked sleepily. "About how lucky I am. We're both lucky." "Yes, we are." Winter came again, the fourth one since Clara had arrived. This time, it felt almost routine, the cold, the snow, the long dark evenings. But routine wasn't bad. Routine meant they knew what they were doing, meant they'd survived enough winters to know they could survive another. In January, Martha Henderson came by despite the snow. "Had to check on you," she said, accepting hot coffee from Clara. "Make sure you were managing all right." "We're fine. Better than fine, actually." "I can see that. You look content." Martha studied her. "That's not something you see much out here. Most people look worn down or desperate. But you look like you found your place." "I have." "Good." Martha set down her cup. "I'm proud of you, Clara. You came here with nothing and built something real. That takes courage most people don't have." After Martha left, Clara thought about that word. Courage. She'd never thought of herself as particularly courageous. She'd just done what needed doing, survived what needed surviving. But maybe that was what courage was. Not grand gestures or dramatic heroics, but the simple act of getting up every day and trying again. Maybe she was courageous after all. The winter passed and spring returned and life continued its rhythm of work and rest, challenge and reward. The ranch kept growing, Clara kept cooking, Caleb kept leading, Beth kept learning. The men kept working. And somewhere in all of that daily living, Clara realized something important. She was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way she'd never been before. Not because life was easy, it wasn't. Not because there were no problems, there were plenty. But because she'd found her purpose, her place, her people. She'd found herself. One evening in late spring, she stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Caleb came to stand beside her, slipping an arm around her waist in the familiar gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Beautiful," he said. "It is." "I meant you." Clara smiled. "Flatterer. Truth-teller." He turned her to face him. "Do you know what you've given me, Clara? Besides the obvious things, good food, a clean house, a functioning ranch. What? Hope. The belief that life isn't over just because tragedy happens, that it's possible to build something new from the rubble of what was lost." His voice was thick with emotion. "You saved my life. Not in some dramatic way, but in all the small daily ways that actually matter. And I want you to know that. I want you to know that you didn't just survive your own losses. You helped me survive mine." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You did the same for me. Gave me a place to be myself. to be valued for what I could do instead of dismissed for what I wasn't. We saved each other then. Yes, we did. They stood there as the light faded and stars began to appear. Behind them, the house was warm and full of people. The kitchen would need cleaning soon. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But right now, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Clara, Caleb said quietly. Yes? Thank you for walking west. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being stubborn enough to keep going even when everything seemed hopeless. Thank you for seeing me when I finally got here. Thank you for giving me a chance to prove myself. Thank you for loving me despite all the ways I'm difficult and stubborn and too much. You're not too much. You're exactly enough. He kissed her softly. And I'll spend the rest of my life grateful that you chose to stay. I'll spend the rest of mine grateful you let me. Later that night, Clara took out her mother's wooden spoon one more time. She held it, feeling the familiar weight, the smooth wood worn by 3 generations of hands. We made it, Mama, she whispered. We found somewhere we belong, somewhere we matter, somewhere we're seen. The spoon didn't answer, but Clara felt the truth of her words anyway. She had made it. Against all odds, through all the rejection and pain and struggle, she'd made it. She'd walked into the wilderness with nothing and built a life worth living. She'd turned a dying ranch into a thriving one. She'd taken a group of broken men and helped make them whole. She'd found love when she thought that part of her life was over. And most importantly, she'd learned that her worth wasn't determined by whether other people saw it. Her worth was inherent, built into every meal she cooked, every person she cared for, every choice she made to keep going despite the odds. She was Clara Ward. She'd survived loss and rejection and the unforgiving frontier. She'd rebuilt herself piece by piece, the same way they'd rebuilt the barn, with patience and determination and the belief that something better was possible. And she'd been right. She set the spoon back on the dresser and climbed into bed beside Caleb. He wrapped his arms around her without waking, and Clara closed her eyes, feeling safe and loved and exactly where she was meant to be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be meals to cook, problems to solve, work to do. But she'd face it all the way she'd faced everything else, with stubbornness and skill and the knowledge that she was strong enough to handle whatever came, because she'd already survived the worst. Everything else was just living, and living, Clara had learned, was the point. Not just surviving, but truly living, building and loving and creating meaning from the daily work of being human. She'd walked west looking for nothing more than survival, and she'd found so much more. She'd found home.